Chapter 5373. Lung Lung frowned and immediately prepared to use the ice prison mirror. The power of this move was enough to threaten beginner golden elixir realm experts when she was in foundation building consummation. Now that she had advanced to beginner golden elixir realm, its power had increased tenfold or even tenfold. It was enough to threaten any golden elixir realm experts, including those in gold elixir realm consummation, especially since this was the Snow Sword faction, where she did not need to deal with Shui Jianfeng alone. Once they started fighting, they would quickly attract onlookers, and if things got out of hand, it would no longer be her problem. However, before Lung Lung could make her move, a bone-chilling coldness had already enveloped Shui Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's voice followed. "Who are you talking about when you don't know what's good for you?" "I knew it. When Lung Lung is in trouble, you, Lin Yi's damned lackey, would definitely jump out and bare your teeth." Hee, I was right. Not only was Shui Jianfeng not shocked, but the corner of his mouth curled into a smug and mocking smile, as if he had forgotten the painful lesson from last time. "So you're saying that you came prepared?" Bing Wuqing looked at him again. Although he did not make a move, nor did he release any terrifying aura, her intuition told her that he was no longer the same as before. Thinking of the few months that he had disappeared, anything was possible with the nature-defying skills of the core. Maybe he had already advanced to the nascent soul realm. Otherwise, with Shui Jianfeng's character of bullying the weak, he would never dare to come back to pick a fight at this time, and in such an open and above-board way. Thinking of this, Bing Wuqing suddenly understood. Provoking Lung Lung to lure her out on purpose. Could it be that this guy wanted to seek revenge on her? "What do you think?" Shui Jianfeng did not hide it, and a ferocious look flashed across his eyes. "Someone asked me to bring you a message. There is a price to pay for betrayal, and traitors will never have a good ending. I hope you are mentally prepared." "Is that so?" Bing Wuqing's expression did not change at all. It was needless to say who the person he was talking about was. From the day he attacked Shui Jianfeng, she had already been prepared for this. She was not afraid at all. It was true that the center was unfathomable, but did that mean that Lin Yi was weak? The fact that the higher-ups in the center had repeatedly instructed their subordinates not to provoke Lin Yi was proof of Lin Yi's fearsomeness. Bing Wuqing believed that Lin Yi and his backer must have the profound strength to contend with the center. This was the most logical explanation. Otherwise, he would not have joined Lin Yi's side so easily. This was a huge gamble, and a smart person like him would not bet easily. "You seem to be fearless. Do you really think that you're invincible just because you've become a nascent soul cultivator? Do you think that no one can deal with you?" Looking at his expression, Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Bing Wuqing as if he was looking at a clown who was about to be avenged by him. "So what you're trying to say is that you can deal with me?" Bing Wuqing's lips curled into a grin. "Of course. Otherwise, wouldn't all my saliva have been wasted?" Shui Jianfeng's expression became more and more smug. However, before he could make a move, his body suddenly sank. A thick layer of ice suddenly covered his entire body. Not only was it difficult for him to move, but it was also impossible for him to even lift his hand. The merciless ice aura this time was much more powerful than before. Bing Wuqing's cultivation level had not improved in the past few months, and she had not taken the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent gathering pills that Lin Yi had given her. Everyone knew that more haste, less speed. However, some people could restrain themselves while others could not. Bing Wuqing, who was an absolutely rational person, naturally belonged to the former category. In terms of direct effects alone, apart from the poisonous gas, the improved version of the core elixir was indeed much more powerful than ordinary elixirs. Even the supreme-grade elixirs that Lin Yi had personally refined could not compare to it. However, there was a huge drawback, and that was that it greatly depleted one's potential. The direct consequence of this was that it would be very difficult for one to achieve breakthroughs in the future, and one's foundation would be severely lacking. Although Bing Wuqing didn't rely on the core elixir to increase her strength like Xue Jianfeng, she had still taken it once. If it weren't for the fact that her natural endowment was so strong that it defied the natural order, no matter how many supreme-grade elixirs Linny gave her, it would have been useless. To be honest, the fact that she was able to overcome the side effects of the core elixir in such a short period of time and successfully break through to the nascent soul realm was a result that shocked not only the outsiders, but even Lin Yi himself. However, no matter how strong and heaven-defying Bing Wuqing's natural endowments were, the side effects still existed. This was not obvious when she was in the nascent soul realm, but it gradually became apparent after she advanced to the nascent soul realm. The most direct manifestation was that it was no longer as easy to achieve breakthroughs as before. With her natural endowments, she could easily achieve breakthroughs with just a few elixirs in the past, but it was not realistic now. Of course, part of the reason was that it was more difficult to achieve breakthroughs in the nascent soul realm, but the side effects were still there. Fortunately, she had that half a stalk of divine knowledge grass as a foundation, which largely mitigated this side effect. Now that she had specially stabilized it for a few months, it could basically be considered to have offset the side effects. As her strength and realm became more stable, even though they were both in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, Bing Wuqing's real strength had increased a lot compared to a few months ago. Even if she were to face a more experienced early-stage nascent soul expert of the same level, she would only be stronger. Therefore, Xue Jianfeng was very confident when he returned this time. Bing Wuqing, who had expected this, was also very confident. Humph! With such insignificant skills, you have the nerve to repeat the same trick in front of me? Xue Jianfeng, who was trapped in the ice, suddenly snorted coldly. An extremely powerful burst of vital energy erupted from his body, and the ice instantly shattered to the ground. There was no longer any obstruction. Seeing this, the expressionless Bing Wuqing's eyes suddenly widened. This guy was not in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, but the peak of the early stage. Are you scared? Xue Jianfeng was very pleased with her shocked expression. He said proudly, "How about it? Do you feel a little regretful now?" Unfortunately, even if you regret it, it's too late. Once you took this step, there's no turning back. To be honest, I really didn't expect that a rational person like you, Bing Wuqing, would be so hot-headed that you would actually take this path of no return. Before I really make a move, why don't you share your thoughts? The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was his greatest source of confidence. In these few months, he wasn't recuperating from his injuries. Instead, he was undergoing further strengthening and upgrading. The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was the result of this strengthening and upgrading. Chapter 5374. However, the key that restricted them was the sample. Not only did they need a ready-made sample source, but they also needed a strong sample recipient. In the beginning, the strongest sample in the secular world was a heaven-level paragon. So the center of the secular world could only produce heaven-level paragon experts. However, when the people of the ancient underworld appeared, foundation establishment and golden core experts were no longer a problem. Now that Chen Dongcheng and Lu Pingon had brought the half-dead Qinzhou, it was only natural that they could produce nascent soul experts. Xue Jianfeng was the first test subject. As for why he could reach the peak of early-stage nascent soul, there was only one reason. Chen Jiu, who was the sample source, was at the peak of early-stage nascent soul. Path of no return? Looks like you're really confident. Bing Wuqing's eyes narrowed into slits. This was a sign that he was serious. No matter how much she looked down on Xue Jianfeng, now that he had become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, he was definitely a formidable opponent. I'm a whole level stronger than you now. Why don't you give me a reason not to be confident? Xue Jianfeng grinned coldly and suddenly drew his sword. The speed of his sword was more than 100 times faster than when he was at Golden Core Paragon. At first glance, it looked like a beam of cold light, and in the next instant, it was already at Bing Wuqing's throat. No one could have imagined that Xue Jianfeng would so openly kill Bing Wuqing in broad daylight. One must know that even when Bing Wuqing had seized the opportunity to turn against him previously, it was only to punish him. This fellow was a classic example of a vile person who would seek revenge whenever he had a grudge. Cold, and Su Xiaodong's eyelids twitched at the sight, and they immediately broke out in cold sweat for Bing Wuqing. However, this was a battle between nascent soul experts, and they were only at the early stage Golden Core experts, so they could not interfere at all. Fortunately, Xue Jianfeng's sword stopped at the last moment. It was not that he had deliberately withdrawn his strength, but that there was an additional layer of ice between the tip of his sword and Bing Wuqing's throat. What was different was that this layer of ice was an eerie black. Clang! With a crisp sound similar to metal colliding, Xue Jianfeng's sword was deflected by this layer of black ice, which shocked the arrogant Xue Jianfeng. He was now a peak early-stage nascent soul expert. How could he not break the defense of an early-stage nascent soul expert when he went all out? Especially when this layer of black ice appeared, it made people's hair stand on end. What kind of evil technique was this? Your level has indeed increased by quite a bit, but unfortunately, your strength has not increased by much. Your sword is a bit unsteady, Bing Wuqing said calmly. Not only was there not the slightest hint of panic in her expression, it was as if she had seen through her opponent's background with this sword strike and regained her confidence. Xue Jianfeng's attack was indeed fast, so fast that he couldn't even react in time. However, the tip of the sword began to drift in the end. This was a sign of an unstable realm and insufficient foundation. No matter how nature-defying the technique was, it was not surprising that Xue Jianfeng would suffer from this after forcefully turning him into an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm in such a short period of time. Otherwise, it would not have been easy for Bing Wuqing to block his sudden attack. Humph! Stop putting on an act. Although that was what he said, Xue Jianfeng began to feel a little diffident. All this while, Bing Wuqing had always been superior to him. Even though she was superior to him now, he actually did not have much confidence. After all, he was not a fool. He knew better than anyone the drawbacks of the improved elixirs, especially when he had just become an expert at the peak early stage nascent soul realm. Against Bing Wuqing, an expert at the early stage nascent soul realm, there was a risk that he would fail miserably. At the end of the day, Xue Jianfeng would always feel inferior in front of a true, peerless genius like Bing Wuqing. It was just that he was deceiving himself and refused to admit it no matter what. Whether I'm putting on airs or not, we'll know once we fight. Bing Wuqing's tone was very unyielding. Unlike the shock she had shown just now, the way she looked at Xue Jianfeng now was filled with aggression, just like how a vicious wolf would look at an injured leopard. Before the leopard was injured, the vicious wolf might have retreated, but now that it had seen through the leopard, the tables had turned. Being stared at like that, Xue Jianfeng felt his scalp go numb for a moment, and he even took half a step back subconsciously. However, he quickly regained his senses and forced a cold laugh. Humph, you sure sound arrogant. Let's see if you have what it takes. Bing Wuqing did not speak, but answered him with her actions. A pitch-black ice sword appeared soundlessly in her hand, emitting an unparalleled mysterious aura. It seemed sacred and solemn, yet evil and ruthless at the same time. It was hard to fathom, but it made one's heart palpitate. Xue Jianfeng's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. Black ice again. Before today, he had never seen such a move from Bing Wuqing. Judging from the situation just now, this was obviously her trump card, and its power must be extraordinary. Just as they were about to fight, a group of people hurried over from afar, and Hong Qingyuan's voice rang out. Wait, Let's talk this out. It was not just sect leader Hong Qingyuan who had come. Great Elder Qi Qianqiu and the other members of the Elders Guild had arrived as well. They could not help but feel nervous. This was a battle between two nascent soul realm old monsters, and once they got serious, it would be a huge disaster for the entire Snow Sword sect. Not to mention that Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing were both members of the Snow Sword sect. To a primordial sect, every nascent soul realm old monster was an invaluable asset. They did not want the Snow Sword sect to lose any of them for nothing, especially if both sides were to suffer heavy losses. Your reinforcements are here. Xue Jianfeng was already in a difficult position, and he was clearly frightened by Bing Wuqing's stance. Now that he had found a way out, he pretended to be magnanimous and said, "Considering that you and I are from the same sect, and considering the bigger picture, I'll remember what you did last time. You'd better know your place in front of me in the future." Pretentious. Bing Wuqing looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot, but she did not make a move forcefully. Her priority was to protect Cold Lung, and it would be detrimental to Cold Lung's safety if they really fought here. Hong Qingyuan and the others breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this. On one hand, they were still shocked by Xue Jianfeng's strength, and on the other hand, they were genuinely worried. If the two of them were to really fight without a care in the world, they would not even dare to stop them. If they dared to interfere in the battle between two nascent soul realm old monsters, even Hong Qingyuan, who was a golden core great perfection, would only end up as cannon fodder. Chapter 5375. Hong Qingyuan and the others looked at each other. Last time, Bing Wuqing had taken matters into her own hands and got herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder, and they hadn't even had the time to report it to the Great Supreme Elder. Now, she had gotten herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder. What the hell was this? Although they criticized her in their hearts, she was now an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm. They, including Hong Qingyuan, had no room to bargain. No matter what she asked, the only thing they could do was to listen obediently. All right, it's settled then. Xue Jianfeng made his decision. Hong Qingyuan and the others all looked at Bing Wuqing. He was the only one who had the right to speak up and object at a time like this. Xue Jianfeng, the first executive Grand Supreme Elder, was obviously trying to ride on his head. The one who had the biggest reaction to this was definitely him. However, Bing Wuqing was completely indifferent. She didn't even have the intention to speak. She just looked at Xue Jianfeng with a sneer in her eyes, as if she wasn't interested. Soon, Xue Jianfeng, Hong Qingyuan, and the others left one after another. When they were far away, Bing Wuqing turned to Lung Lung and reminded, "Based on this guy's character, he won't let this go easily. Be careful for the next few days, and avoid him if you can." "Got it." Lung Lung nodded, because she had just advanced to the Golden Core realm. She needed to stabilize her realm. She just needed to find a slightly more secluded place. Moreover, with Bing Wuqing as a deterrent, Xue Jianfeng didn't dare to be too unbridled. Little did he know that Bing Wuqing herself was feeling very weak at this moment. Although she looked like she was going to defeat Xue Jianfeng, it was actually just a bluff. The sudden appearance of Hong Qingyuan and the others was not so much to give Xue Jianfeng a way out, but to say that it had helped him out of his predicament. The black ice that Xue Jianfeng was most afraid of was indeed a killer weapon that he had recently cultivated. Unfortunately, it was far from being fully formed. Its effect in actual combat was very limited, which could not be concealed once they started fighting. Fortunately, Xue Jianfeng was frightened. Bing Wuqing had originally planned to continue stabilizing her realm for a while, but now she couldn't. Facing Xue Jianfeng, a peak early nascent soul realm expert who had suddenly appeared, she had to improve her strength as soon as possible. She was very clear that Xue Jianfeng wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. He might be able to scare them this time, but he might not be able to do so the next time. Fortunately, She still had the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent condensation pills that Lin Yi had given her. In addition, she had been stabilizing and stabilizing herself during this period of time. As long as she went into seclusion for a period of time, Bing Wuqing was confident that she could elevate her realm by 1 level. If she was lucky, she might even elevate 2 levels in a row. At that time, he would have enough strength to use the black cold ice. Xue Jianfeng would naturally not be a threat to him. Bing Wuqing was never one to procrastinate. Once she had made up her mind, she immediately went into seclusion. For 3 consecutive days, everything was peaceful. However, this peace was soon broken. Xue Jianfeng took much earlier than Bing Wuqing had expected, and he did not manage to see through the black ice. But he could tell that Bing Wuqing was putting on an act. Otherwise, with Bing Wuqing's extremely pragmatic nature, as long as she had enough power, she would not have swallowed her pride like this, especially when he realized that Lung Lung had disappeared without a trace and Bing Wuqing had gone into closed-door cultivation. Xue Jianfeng felt even more strongly that he had been tricked. His first reaction in anger and humiliation was to barge into Bing Wuqing's cave abode. Anyone who went into closed-door cultivation would activate a defensive formation to prevent outsiders from invading, and Bing Wuqing's cave abode was no exception. Unfortunately, the defensive formation here was not of a high level. At most, it could withstand the attack of a golden core, perfected expert. In front of a nascent soul old monster, it was practically non-existent, let alone Xue Jianfeng. Xue Jianfeng's sudden barge was far beyond Bing Wuqing's expectations. He was at a crucial point in his closed-door cultivation. He had suffered a great loss in just 1 encounter. If he had not barely released the heartless ice force at the last moment to delay the other party for a moment, he would have been killed instantly. Otherwise, he would practically be killed in an instant. This time, Xue Jianfeng had truly unleashed his killing intent. However, Bing Wuqing was Bing Wuqing after all. Even though she had been viciously tricked by Xue Jianfeng, she was still able to escape death by herself and escape with serious injuries. The Snow Sword School was in an uproar when the news came out. Hong Qingyuan and the others almost went crazy when they heard about it. Many of them were people who prioritized the interests of the school above everything else. Before this, they were all looking forward to a glorious future. Xue Jianfeng, Bing Wuqing, and the original Grand Supreme Elder made up a total of 3 nascent soul old monsters. Such a luxurious, top-notch configuration had already surpassed the level of all the 10 small sects and families. They could even begin to challenge the legendary 4 big sects, which were the true supreme rulers of the ancient underworld. Once they became one of the 4 big sects and families, it would be a brand new era for the entire Snow Sword School. They were about to make history. Little did they expect that before they could realize this beautiful dream, Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing would start fighting again. This time, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured, so much so that she finally escaped from the Snow Sword School with all her might. Her whereabouts were unknown. Elder Xue, can you please explain to us what is going on? Hong Qingyuan asked, suppressing his anger. If the other party was not a nascent soul old monster, he would not even want to speak right now. He would have been punished according to the school rules. Unfortunately, all the school rules were set for those below the sect leader. For a nascent soul old monster like Xue Jianfeng, all the school rules were nothing but a fart. What is going on? Do you even need to ask? Bing Wuqing betrayed the school. It's that simple. Because of his strength, Xue Jianfeng no longer cared about Hong Qingyuan and the others. He did not even bother to make up an excuse for this kind of thing. He could deal with it with just a few words. Hong Qingyuan and the others all had a strange expression, as if they were constipated. Even if 10,000 alpacas were galloping in their hearts, they would not dare to refute him directly. Also, where did Cole go? Find her at all costs. Xue Jianfeng directly ordered everyone, then added, spread the word. If I don't see her by sunset today, Then I will punish her master, Su Xiaodong." His words caused the expressions of Hong Qingyuan and the others to change drastically again. Not only did they not feel the joy brought about by three nascent soul old monsters, but they were all anxious. Xue Jianfeng was acting so unbridled. He was prepared to become the local tyrant of the entire Snow Sword School. Chapter 5376. Under Xue Jianfeng's tyrannical power, everyone from sect leader Hong Qingyuan to ordinary Snow Sword sect disciples could only look at each other in silence. Su Xiaodong was captured and tied to the execution platform in public. The result was not out of Xue Jianfeng's expectations. Lung Lung, who had disappeared after hearing that her master was in trouble, appeared before the sky turned dark. "I'm here. Can you let go of my master now?" Lung Lung looked straight at Xue Jianfeng on the platform. "Haha, the relationship between master and disciple is really touching. But when did I say that I would let go of your master if you came?" Xue Jianfeng smiled evilly. "What do you want?" Lung Lung was not surprised. "Nothing much. Even if I told you to give in right now, I don't think you'd agree to it. But it's fine, I'm patient. You'll understand when Lin Yi's unlucky, and I won't have to say anything then." Xue Jianfeng looked very confident, and then sneered. "What you have to do now is very simple. Stand with your master. If Bing Wuqing still remembers the mission Lin Yi gave her, I think she'll show herself." Compared to Lung Lung, Xue Jianfeng paid more attention to Bing Wuqing. After all, she was the one who could really pose a fatal threat to him. Now that he had managed to seriously injure her, he had to take this opportunity to eliminate her. Lung Lung was nothing in comparison. Although that was what he said, Xue Jianfeng had no idea whether Bing Wuqing would show up or not. He knew very well that she was an extremely rational and realistic person. Since she knew that she would be courting death by coming back, the possibility of her showing up on her own was really not high. The result was out of Xue Jianfeng's expectation. Bing Wuqing appeared before his patience had even begun to wear off. How rare, how rare. I didn't think that a cold-faced guy like you would be so loyal to Lin Yi, coming back to die for his woman. Should I say that you're noble? Or should I say that you're stupid?" Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but be overjoyed. Lung Lung was also very surprised by this. Although she already knew that Bing Wuqing was one of them, there was not much substantial interaction between them. She never knew that Bing Wuqing's loyalty to Lin Yi was to such an extent. It was truly impressive. "I'm not noble or stupid," Bing Wuqing answered. "Oh, why did you come back when it was clearly a suicide mission? Don't tell me you think you can escape alive?" Xue Jianfeng did not hide his murderous intent at all. Now that Bing Wuqing was severely injured, no one else from the Snow Sword faction dared to stop him. Today was the day Bing Wuqing would die. Yes. Bing Wuqing's answer was short and forceful. "Interesting, let's give it a try." The corners of Xue Jianfeng's lips curled up. It was true that he had been intimidated by the other party previously, but now he had seen through the other party's false bravado. Furthermore, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. If he couldn't kill her even with this, he might as well find a piece of tofu and kill himself. "Sure, let's give it a try," someone responded, but it wasn't Bing Wuqing's voice. Hearing this voice, Xue Jianfeng's expression instantly changed. Lung Ling's expression also changed greatly. However, the former's expression became extremely unsightly, while the latter was overjoyed. No one would have thought that Lin Yi would actually show up at Middle Island at this time. This was purely a coincidence. The reason why Lin Yi appeared here was purely because the situation at Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island was almost under control, so he came to Middle Island to visit Lung Lung. He didn't expect to run into this matter. "I didn't expect that after not seeing you for just a few months, your wings have hardened. You're not simple." Lin Yi looked at Xue Jianfeng, who was standing on the high platform. His expression was neither happy nor sad, making it impossible for others to guess what he was thinking. Because the lesson from last time was still fresh in his mind. Even though Xue Jianfeng had now become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, which was completely different from how he used to be, he still subconsciously trembled when he was looked at by Lin. However, this instinctive and inexplicable uneasiness was quickly suppressed by Xue Jianfeng, now that he was already at the peak early-stage nascent soul. If he was still afraid of Lin Yi, who was merely in the foundation-building stage, wouldn't he be laughed at by others? Ha 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 ha, what a good day today. I can't believe there's such a pleasant surprise. Bing Wuqing, you've done a good job. You're really a guy who knows how to adapt to the circumstances. You're really good at changing the rudder when the wind blows. Xue Jianfeng laughed and looked at Bing Wuqing with a face full of praise, giving people the impression that Bing Wuqing had listened to his instructions and deliberately led Lin Yi to his death. He had never forgotten the great shame that Lin Yi had brought him before. Originally, he thought that he would at least have a chance to avenge himself when he went to the North Island, but he didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to come to his door at this time. That being said, Xue Jianfeng didn't have the guts to really kill Lin Yi in broad daylight. After all, it was a serious matter. Not only he, but even the bespectacled doctor above him couldn't bear it. But as long as no one was killed, it shouldn't be a problem to give him a good punishment. Bing Wuqing ignored him. She didn't even have the mood to talk to such a low-level person who was trying to drive a wedge between them. If Lin Yi took the bait so easily, it could only mean that he was blind. Bing Wuqing had never thought of herself as a blind, disabled person. Lin Yi also ignored him and walked directly toward the other party. Bing Wuqing wanted to follow him, but he waved his hand to stop her. Just watch the show. There's no need to be so nervous when dealing with this kind of trash. Xue Jianfeng didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and snorted. You talk big. People who don't know you might think you're some old nascent soul realm monster. Hee hee, there's really no one who can act like you. To tell you the truth, I'm not a person who likes to show off. Most of the time, I'm just doing normal things, like killing an ant with a wave of my hand. But in the eyes of people like you, I'm just showing off. Don't you think that's unfair? Killing an ant? Who's an ant? Do you mean that I, an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, am just an ant in your eyes? Ha ha ha! Xue Jianfeng laughed maniacally at the sky, laughing so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. After a long while, he finally straightened his body and mocked. Looks like I wasn't wrong at all. You're not just acting cool, you're even acting swollen. Whatever you say. Now you can kneel. Lin Yi's tone wasn't aggressive at all. It was calm as usual, as if it was a matter of course. Chapter 5377. Lin Yi had inexplicably asked Xue Jianfeng, a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, to kneel. Was this guy an idiot? Where did his confidence come from? At this time, Lin Yi was only 5 steps away from him. Xue Jianfeng had already made up his mind to make Lin Yi suffer. In a fit of rage, he unsheathed his snow sword without hesitation. With a flash of sword light, it was pressed against Lin Yi's throat. The scene was exactly the same as when he was dealing with Bing Wuqing. Lung Lang and Bing Wuqing's eyelids twitched when they saw this scene. They had to admit that this guy's sword speed after advancing to the peak early-stage nascent soul realm was a little too fast. Although there were other drawbacks, such as the tip of the sword being shaky and the lack of power, the speed of the sword itself was extremely terrifying. When one's speed reached a certain degree, it would become an unbreakable technique. Even though Xue Jianfeng's sword had yet to reach the pinnacle of speed, it had undoubtedly reached the pinnacle in the eyes of the minor pugilistic world. After all, this fellow could be considered a genius. His aptitude was not fake. Xue Jianfeng had never thought of finishing off Lin Yi with a single strike. This was actually just a test. He wanted to let Lin Yi have a taste of the feeling of brushing shoulders with the god of death. He wanted Lin Yi to make a fool of himself in front of everyone. In his opinion, the show had only just begun. Unfortunately, the show that he had anticipated had only just begun. To be precise, it had already ended before it had even begun. Xue Jianfeng's sword was fast, but Lin Yi's soul-reaping hand was even faster. At the moment when he struck, a soul-reaping hand with black gas had already appeared above his head. His entire primordial spirit was instantly controlled, and then slowly pulled out of his physical body. One had to know that even Qinjiu, the sample source, could not resist Lin Yi's soul-reaping hand, not to mention Xue Jianfeng, a peak early-stage nascent soul expert who relied purely on imitation. In front of the soul-reaping hand, he was nothing but a fart. Plop! Before his primordial spirit was completely pulled out of his physical body, Xue Jianfeng hurriedly knelt down without hesitation. In the face of death, face and hatred were all meaningless. Begging for mercy was the most important thing. Everyone was speechless. At this time, Hong Qingyuan and the others had already rushed over after hearing the news. It was just that they had no way of interfering in Xue Jianfeng's matter, nor did they feel that with Xue Jianfeng's strength, he would be at a disadvantage. They never imagined that it would actually be such an outcome. Xue Jianfeng actually really knelt down. Everyone looked at Lin Yi with incomparable shock and doubt. Who exactly was this person? In fact, even Bing Wuqing was shocked at this moment.
She had thought that Lin Yi would be able to deal with Xue Jianfeng. Otherwise, with Lin Yi's style, he would not have come forward so rashly if he did not have enough confidence. However, the scene of him forcing Xue Jianfeng to his knees with such ease really refreshed Bing Wuqing's worldview. Wasn't this boss of hers a little too strong and unreasonable? Heh, you're quite sensible in the face of death. Seeing this, Lin Yi smiled. Seeing that Xue Jianfeng had been scared to the point of wetting his pants, he then released his primordial spirit, allowing him to escape. After all, this was the territory of the Snow Sword faction. Even if it was for Lung Lung's sake, Lin Yi could not directly kill Xue Jianfeng as soon as he arrived. Moreover, the unfathomable core was involved. Lin Yi did not plan to take the initiative to fire the first shot yet. Naturally, he would not mess up his rhythm just because of a mere Xue Jianfeng. When the primordial spirit returned to his physical body, Xue Jianfeng's face turned pale, although he did not seem to be injured at first glance. In fact, having the primordial spirit forcibly extracted from the physical body was a very damaging thing to his vitality, especially since Xue Jianfeng was an expert who relied on the core's techniques to forcefully reach his current level. In this aspect, primordial spirit was completely weak, so the impact was even greater. Without a few months' time, Xue Jianfeng would not be able to recover to his peak state. I have eyes but failed to see. Please be magnanimous and let me go. I won't dare to do such a stupid thing again. I won't dare to do it again. Xue Jianfeng hurriedly begged for mercy while trembling with fear. He almost buried his head into the ground. After all, he was not a fool. Although Lin Yi had released his primordial spirit, with Lin Yi's technique, just now, killing him was almost a matter of a thought. In order to live, he had no choice but to beg for mercy. Is that so? But why do I remember that I just taught you a lesson a few months ago? Now, you don't recognize me anymore. What if you go back on your words in the future? I don't trust a guy with a criminal record like you. Lin Yi looked down at him from above. This? Xue Jianfeng crawled on the ground. Instantly, he was sweating profusely. He did not even have the chance to refute this kind of thing. He could only beg with all his might. Please believe me. I really won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. Elder Xue, please forgive me if I have offended you in any way. I represent all the disciples of the Snow Sword sect in gratitude. Hong Qingyuan also came forward with a group of elders to plead for mercy. No matter what, Xue Jianfeng was still a member of the Snow Sword sect. Moreover, he was a nascent soul realm old monster that they needed to rely on in the future. If he were to die in the hands of Lin Yi, it would be an incomparably huge loss to the entire Snow Sword sect.
They could not afford it. Lin Yi glanced at them, then pouted at Xue Jianfeng on the ground and said, "They are pleading for you." This is a way to step down. Aren't you going to do something? Do something? Xue Jianfeng was stunned. Nonsense. You went back on your words and went against me. You want me to let you go without paying a price? Do you really think I'm easy to fool? Or do you think I won't kill you? Lin Yi snorted coldly, feeling the murderous intent that was gradually being released from the other party. Xue Jianfeng could not help but shrink his neck. People's minds always turned especially fast in this kind of life and death situation. He immediately understood what Lin Yi meant. Last time, Lin Yi let him go because he handed over half of the divine sense grass. So, it was clear that if he wanted to live this time, he would have to pay a sufficient price. But I don't have the divine sense grass anymore. Xue Jianfeng said bitterly, then changed to something else. If you don't have anything decent, then cripple one of your arms. It'll be a good lesson for you, Lin Yi said casually. Aye. Xue Jianfeng's face was bitter. If he wanted to satisfy Lin Yi, he needed at least a treasure on the level of the divine sense grass. How could he take it out in such a short time? I never repeat myself. If you can't take out something decent, then cripple one of your arms. Otherwise, if I do it myself, you won't be able to get away so easily, Lin Yi said indifferently. Chapter 5378. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Xue Jianfeng's face turned red. Seeing that Lin Yi's murderous intent was getting stronger and stronger, he had no choice but to clench his teeth and cripple his left arm. This should be enough, Xue Jianfeng said, enduring the pain. Scram. If there's a next time, you won't have to kneel. As Lin Yi spoke, he sent Xue Jianfeng flying with a kick in front of everyone. If this happened again, it would be Xue Jianfeng's death date. At that time, even if he didn't want to start a war with the center, he definitely wouldn't let this scourge live. Xue Jianfeng retreated in a hurry with the help of Xue Liping. Everyone's attention, once again, fell on Lin Yi. Witnessing this scene, Hong Qingyuan and the others were shocked and in awe. They did not dare to have any other thoughts. This person was too terrifying. I am the sect leader of Snow Sword Sect, Hong Qingyuan. May I know your name, and what orders do you have for my sect? Hong Qingyuan braced himself and asked on behalf of the crowd. My name is Lin Yi. As for my identity, I am now the Grand Master of the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island. You don't have to restrain me like this. I'm here to visit Lung Lung and Wu Qing. There's nothing else, Lin Yi answered casually, although they had already guessed it. Hearing it from Lin Yi's mouth still shocked everyone. The way they looked at Lung Lung and Bing, Wu Qing changed a little, thinking to themselves that it was no wonder these two had improved so much in such a short period of time. It turned out that they had found such a powerful backer outside. This was incredible. At this moment, the elders, including Hong Qingyuan, could not help but break out in a cold sweat. It was fortunate that they did not offend Lung Lung before. Otherwise, if they had been like Xue Jianfeng and called him a traitorous disciple, they would have followed in Xue Jianfeng's footsteps, or even worse. After all, they did not have Xue Jianfeng's strength. If Xue Jianfeng was an ant in front of Lin Yi, then everyone present was not even an ant. They could only be regarded as dust, so it's the martial granduncle of the Blue Cloud Sect of the North Island. It's an honor to meet you. Please forgive us. Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly saluted to Lin Yi together. Their attitude was even more humble than that of the people of Green Cloud Sect in the North Island. Although they were from the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island and had nothing to do with the Snow Sword Sect in the Middle Island, they should have the awareness of dust. Not to mention other aspects. At least they had to show their attitude on the surface. Ignorance is not a crime. Besides, I'm here as a private person, so there's no need for all these formalities. Lin Yi paused for a moment before saying, as an outsider, I shouldn't be able to comment on the matters of your Snow Sword School. However, since it's related to cold, I still have to ask, is she a traitor disciple of your school? Of course not, Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly denied. If she's not, then why didn't anyone stand up to stop Xue Jianfeng from treating her like this? Does the Snow Sword School not even have this basic rule? Lin Yi frowned and said, "This." Hong Qingyuan and the others could only look at each other and smile bitterly. If they had the strength to stop Xue Jianfeng, they would not have allowed Xue Jianfeng to be so unscrupulous. But he was a nascent soul old monster, and even Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. What could they do? You're one of the 10 small sects and families after all. It's a bit embarrassing for you to act like this. Lin Yi taunted them mercilessly. To be honest, he was suppressing his anger at the moment. Luckily, he happened to be here. Otherwise, if something really happened to Cold, Xue Jianfeng would naturally be the culprit. But these incompetent higher-ups of the Snow Sword School would not be able to escape the title of accomplice. At that time, the entire Snow Sword School would have to bear his anger. We've embarrassed ourselves in front of you, Senior. Hong Qingyuan and the others collectively sweated. Although the other party's words were unpleasant, they indeed could not refute. No matter how powerful Xue Jianfeng's strength was, they were the actual decision-makers of the sect's affairs. According to the ancestral teachings, unless it was a major event that concerned the survival of the sect, the supreme elders could not interfere with the sect's affairs. Just from this point alone, the entire higher-ups of the Elders Guild were collectively derelict in their duties. Logically speaking, I shouldn't say this as an outsider, but Cold and I have a special relationship. I don't want anything to happen to her, otherwise. He did not finish his words, but the meaning was clear. Lin Yi smiled and said, "Speaking of which, I have a bit of a relationship with your Snow Sword School. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I don't want to make things unpleasant. Is that okay?" Yes. We'll keep your instructions in mind, Senior." Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly responded, but they were a little confused. This senior granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island actually said that he had a bit of a relationship with our Snow Sword School. What did that mean? Little did they know that the so-called relationship Lin Yi mentioned was actually with the Snow Sword School on the Heaven Island. After all, Sydney had stayed in the Snow Sword School before, and even Wei Shinjin was a member of the Snow Sword School. Lin Yi was treated as a distinguished guest by Hong Qingyuan and the others. They were all extremely respectful, even more humble than when they were facing Xue Jianfeng. This not only showed that Xue Jianfeng's popularity was too poor, but it also fully reflected the philosophy of the ancient Jianghu, which was to respect the strong. On the other side, Xue Jianfeng, who had escaped a calamity, did not hide away to heal his wounds, nor did he go to find the glasses doctor and the others. Instead, he went straight to the forbidden area of the Snow Sword School, the Snowy Peak. As one of the 10 small sects and clans, the territory controlled by the Snow Sword School was naturally not small, and the Snowy Peak was the highest peak within a radius of 100 miles. Strange mountains and rocks towered into the sky. The peak was covered in snow all year round, and the temperature was extremely low. Let alone ordinary people, this place was definitely a forbidden area for Foundation establishment experts. Even the Golden Core experts could not last long. This place was the activity territory of the nascent soul old monsters. Before the rise of Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, there was only one nascent soul old monster in the entire Snow Sword School, and that was the Grand Elder Yu Taitsong. Without Yu Taitsong's approval, other than the sect leader Hong Qingyuan, no one dared to trespass the Snowy Peak. However, Xue Jianfeng clearly did not care about this little rule. He did not come before because he did not want to. After all, the environment on the Snowy Peak was so harsh, and it was better to be tyrannical down there than to come up and suffer. But now the situation was different. Because of the existence of Lin Yi, this place was probably the safest place in the entire Snow Sword School for him. Unless Lin Yi deliberately wanted to shed all pretenses of cordiality with Xue Jianfeng, He could not possibly barge into the forbidden area to find trouble with him, right? Chapter 5379. Xue Jianfeng's main mission this time was to execute the traitor Bing Wuqing. But now that Bing Wuqing was not dead, he was forced to cripple his own arm. How was he going to explain this when he returned? Lin, he can't stay here forever. I'll hide first. When he leaves, I'll settle the score with that dead face and Lung. Xue Jianfeng gritted his teeth. Although he was extremely unwilling, in front of Lin Yi's tyranny, he could only choose to endure the humiliation. However, before Xue Jianfeng could properly rest, a powerful aura from the top of the mountain had already enveloped him. Xue Jianfeng's heart suddenly trembled. This aura was actually stronger than his. It seemed to be at least mid-stage nascent soul. No, it should be mid-stage peak. Yu Taitsong. After seeing the appearance of the person, Xue Jianfeng almost blurted out. This person was the great elder Yu Taitsong. But wasn't this old man always in seclusion? Why did he suddenly come out? Nascent soul old monster? Who are you? How dare you break into my snow sword sect's forbidden area? Yu Taitsong was equally shocked after sensing the other person's aura. His first reaction was that the snow sword sect had been invaded and even exterminated. After all, the other party had even sent out a nascent soul old monster. That was definitely a situation where they would not rest until they were dead. In the entire snow sword sect, who else but him could deal with a nascent soul old monster? But after being stunned for a moment, Yu Taitsong quickly reacted. This person in front of him was not an outsider. After all, Xue Jianfeng was once a representative figure of the snow sword sect. As a great elder, he had seen him several times and could not completely not recognize him. Elder Yu, you've come out of seclusion? Xue Jianfeng also reacted and quickly corrected himself. His strength was only at the bottom of the early stage nascent soul realm, but this person in front of him was a true mid-stage nascent soul realm expert. How would he dare to be the slightest bit disrespectful? You are Xue Jianfeng? What's going on? How did you suddenly become a peak early stage nascent soul realm expert? Yu Taitsong was dumbfounded. In less than 2 years, he had gone from foundation, establishment, great perfection to nascent soul realm peak. This kind of thing really overturned his worldview. Normal people would not be able to accept it. This is a long story. There are some fortuitous encounters that ordinary people can't imagine. Of course, the most important thing is still my own extraordinary talent. I'll tell Elder Yu in detail in the future. Xue Jianfeng evaded the important and dwelled on the trivial. Super talent. Yu Taitsong didn't hide his suspicions at all. Xue Jianfeng's natural endowments were indeed not bad, but in his eyes he was far from being nature-defying. At least, he couldn't be compared to Bing Wuqing. What kind of nature-defying opportunity did this brat get? Let's not talk about this first. Elder Yu, our snow sword school is in big trouble. Xue Jianfeng rolled his eyes and pretended to be anxious. What big trouble? Yu Taitsong was originally prepared to question Xue Jianfeng, but his attention was immediately diverted. After taking a look at Xue Jianfeng's left arm, he asked in a deep voice, "You were injured by someone?" To be able to injure Xue Jianfeng, an existence at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, that person's strength absolutely could not be underestimated no matter how one looked at it. If they were not careful, it might be a great crisis that could lead to the annihilation of their clan. Yes, the one who injured me was the newly emerged immemorial grandmaster of the Blue Cloud clan in the North Island. This person is called Lin Yi. He colluded with the traitorous disciples of our snow sword school, Lung and Bing Wuqing. Not only did they find an opportunity to injure me, but they also worked from the inside and outside to control the entire sect. Xue Jianfeng took the opportunity to fan the flames. His plan was very simple. Since he couldn't defeat Lin Yi, then he might as well provoke this peak of the middle nascent soul realm Yu Taitsong into action. It would be best if he won, but there was no loss if he lost. There's actually such a thing. Yu Taitsong fell for it, as expected. Hearing that, he was instantly enraged. There was actually someone who dared to collude with the traitorous disciples to control the Snow Sword School. How could this be tolerated? However, before Xue Jianfeng could rejoice, Yu Taitsong immediately retracted his anger. Looking him up and down, he said in an unfathomable tone, "You can't be deceiving this old man, right?" "How could that be? Whether what I said is true or false, with Elder Yu's intelligence, you only need to go down and casually walk around. What's the point of me lying to you here?" Xue Jianfeng said without changing his expression. "Is that so?" Yu Taitsong was skeptical. After all, he was an old monster who had become shrewd with age. No matter how good Xue Jianfeng's expression was, he could not hide some extremely minute flaws. However, Yu Taitsong could also feel that the other party's words were half true and half false. At least he could be sure that the strength of that Blue Cloud clan in the North Island, Linyi, was definitely not to be underestimated. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to injure Xue Jianfeng's arm. It's absolutely true. If this goes on, our Snow Sword School will completely fall into the hands of outsiders. You, the pillar of stability, must not ignore this, Xue Jianfeng hurriedly advised. Even if it's really as you said, I'm afraid I'm also powerless right now. Yu Taitsong laughed bitterly. Chapter 5380. Of course, he could lie through his teeth, but how could it be easy to deceive an old fox like Yu Taitsong? If he was not careful, it would backfire on him. If Yu Taitsong saw him as an enemy with ulterior motives, then he would be screwed. The Lin Yi you mentioned is from the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island? I haven't heard of him before. Yu Taitsong frowned and asked. There was no need for Xue Jianfeng to continue to sow discord. From the moment he heard that Lin Yi had intervened in the Snow Sword sect, they were basically destined to be enemies. He was originally a primordial spirit left in the secular world. Because of this experience in the secular world, he had the opportunity to return to the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. In just a few months, he had already killed Chenjiu, the highest elder, and became the real new master of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. Now he wants to extend his hand into our Snow Sword sect. This guy's ambition is not ordinary. Xue Jianfeng explained while continuing to add oil to the fire. He knew from the beginning that Chenjiu was killed by Lin Yi. After all, Chenjiu was the source of his strength. But from what Qin Dongqing and Lu Ping'an said, Chenjiu was killed by Lin Yi, so he did not take it to heart. Otherwise, he would not dare to show off in front of Lin, even if he was beaten to death. Unfortunately, it was too late to know now. His left arm was crippled. Preposterous. Yu Taitsong was provoked again. Because he failed to break through to the late Yuanying stage, he was already full of anger. At this time it was easier to be irritable, but it was limited to irritation, not to the extent of losing his mind. In fact, Xue Jianfeng's words were self-defeating. If Yu Taitsong still had doubts about Lin Yi's strength, then when he heard that Chenjiu was killed by Lin Yi, the last bit of doubt suddenly disappeared without a trace. It should be known that he had dealt with Chenjiu of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island many times, and was well aware of Chenjiu's strength. Although Yu Taitsong's current strength was far above Chenjiu's in terms of Yuanying old monster's experience, Chenjiu was much deeper than him. Back when he was still at the peak of the Gold Core realm, Chenjiu was already a well-known nascent soul realm old monster. Now that he had surpassed Chenjiu, other than proving that Chenjiu's aptitude and opportunities were not as good as his, it also proved that Chenjiu's foundation was absolutely sufficient. In the entire primordial underworld, if Chenjiu claimed to be number 2 in the early nascent soul realm, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. The likes of Xue Jianfeng simply couldn't be compared to him. Since this Lin Yi, who he had never met before, was able to kill Qinjiu, then his strength was at least at the middle stage of yuanying. There was no doubt about this point, and he might even be stronger than this. Especially since this guy was an ambitious person, then he, Yu Taitsong, could not rashly leave the mountain at this time. At the very least, he had to wait until his injuries were healed. After waiting for a long time, seeing that Yu Taitsong didn't continue after saying preposterous, Xue Jianfeng was instantly dumbfounded. Frowning, he glanced at this grand elder and said, "Elder Yu, you wouldn't be afraid, right?" "Nonsense." Yu Taitsong couldn't help blushing, glaring. This old man is a dignified middle-stage yuanying expert. Looking at the entire primordial underworld, the number of people that can defeat this old man can be counted on one's fingers. Why would I be afraid of an insignificant nobody? Then you are. Although Xue Jianfeng didn't say anything unpleasant, his expression had already explained everything. But that expression had already explained everything. Within the suspicion, there was clear disdain. Being looked at with such a gaze, anyone would be enraged, let alone Yu Taitsong, who had always been high and mighty. However, Yu Taitsong ultimately still endured. Everything cannot be impulsive. One must think thrice before acting. This old man is currently injured. If I rashly go down, other than putting myself in a passive position, there is no benefit. As you said, this Lin, you won't start a massacre at my snow sword sect for a while. Why don't we wait for a while, and wait for this old man to recover before leaving the mountain? Then when do we have to wait? Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but frown. Things can be done slowly. In any case, you are now a peak early yuanying expert. Why don't you even have this little bit of patience? Yu Taitsong looked at him with some dissatisfaction. He paused and said, "According to what you said just now, that Lin, he wants to dip his fingers into snow sword sect. He won't leave for a while. What's the harm in waiting for a month or so?" This, Xue Jianfeng choked. He couldn't help but think that he had miscalculated. If he had known earlier, he would have changed to a more urgent way of speaking. He was very clear that Lin, he definitely wouldn't have the leisure to dip his fingers into snow sword sect. If he waited for a month or so before leaving the mountain, he would have long disappeared. What? Don't tell me you have something to hide from this old man? Yu Taitsong said suspiciously. He was originally a fellow who had become shrewd with age. His vigilance was naturally unquestionable. Although Xue Jianfeng could be considered as someone on his side, suddenly becoming a peak early yuanying was really full of strangeness. With Yu Taitsong's suspicious nature, it wouldn't be easy for Xue Jianfeng to completely gain his trust. No, absolutely not. Xue Jianfeng jumped in fright. If he were to fall out with Yu Taitsong, he wouldn't have a good ending. He quickly changed the topic and said, "Actually, I know of a good place. Not only can it let Elder Yu quickly recover from your injuries, it can also let you advance a level in a short period of time." "What place?" Yu Taitsong was startled, his expression showing some disbelief. "Speaking of this, in less than 2 years, I broke through from foundation perfection all the way to today's peak early yuanying. Elder Yu, don't you think it's strange?" Xue Jianfeng said with a flash of inspiration. Of course it's strange. Yu Taitsong's interest was instantly aroused. His first question just now was about this matter. It was just that Xue Jianfeng had laughed it off temporarily. Looking at his posture, could it be that this brat was willing to say the real reason? The reason is very simple. It's because I joined an unfathomably powerful organization. It's precisely by relying on the organization's power that I completed my current world-shaking transformation. Xue Jianfeng's tone was filled with pride. Joining the center could be said to be a turning point in his fate. Although he couldn't avoid being controlled by the poisonous gas, compared to the supreme strength he could easily obtain, this little regret was nothing. Organization. Yu Taitsong's eyelids twitched when he heard this. His entire aura immediately became somewhat unfriendly. His tone unfathomable as he said, "You joined another organization? In other words, you've already betrayed the Snow Sword sect?" As long as one joined another organization, regardless of whether it was a sect or a family, they would naturally be seen as betraying the sect. This was an undeniable point. Chapter 5381. He had long been mentally prepared for this. Since he dared to say these words, he naturally had a certain degree of confidence in his heart. After all, through the conversation just now and his previous understanding of Yu Taitsong, this great elder was not an inflexible person who didn't know how to adapt. Oh, then this old man will listen respectfully. Yu Taitsong was indeed just putting on a show. Clearing the house was just a slogan to deceive people's hearts. When it was needed, he would use it to shout. As for now, it clearly hadn't reached that step. With the power of the organization, since it can make me a peak early Yuanying stage expert in less than 2 years, then naturally it can also easily make Elder Yu a level higher. At that time, let alone late Yuanying stage, even the unprecedented great perfection of Yuanying stage is not impossible. Elder Yu, don't you want to give it a try? Shui Jianfeng tempted. Although these words were a spur-of-the-moment idea, it wasn't entirely his own idea. Before this, the bespectacled doctor had mentioned the possibility of recruiting Yu Taitsong. But firstly, this person had always been in a state of closed-door training. Secondly, this person's strength was too high. Without a suitable opportunity, it would be difficult to recruit him. Therefore, he had never tried it. Now, because of Lin Yi's pressing, it could be considered a rare opportunity. It was just right to push the boat with the current. Great perfection of Yuanying stage. These words to any Yuanying stage old monster was a fatal temptation. Yu Taitsong was naturally no exception, especially at this juncture where he had just failed to break through to the late Yuanying stage. The impact of this temptation was almost invincible. Unsurprisingly, Yu Taitsong fell into silence. If it was anyone else who said this, he would definitely scoff at it. But Shui Jianfeng, a living example, was standing in front of him. He couldn't help but believe it. After a long while, Yu Taitsong's breathing was somewhat rough as he raised his head. You really have a way to let this old man touch the great perfection of Yuanying stage. Of course, I have never had the habit of wasting my saliva. Right now, I am formally extending an olive branch to you on behalf of the organization. Whether or not you want to become the #1 person in the entire immemorial small Jianghu will depend on Elder Yu's decision. Shui Jianfeng was all smiles as he continued to persuade Yu Taitsong, but he was secretly calculating in his heart. If he could convince Yu Taitsong to join them this time, it would definitely be a great merit. At that time, not only would the bespectacled doctor not punish him, he would even be heavily rewarded. As for the so-called #1 person of the immemorial small Jianghu, this was just a fool Yu Taitsong who didn't know the inside story. When the center really grasped that technology, he, Shui Jianfeng, could become a nascent soul great perfection expert in minutes. Under focused nurturing, he might even be stronger than this. The so-called #1 person was nothing. Silence again. At this time, silence in itself was already a kind of attitude. Yu Taitsong was clearly moved. However, in the end, he was still an old monster with a suspicious nature. If he wanted to make Yu Taitsong take the bait with just a few words, he was still lacking by a bit. Elder Yu, there is one more thing that I have to remind you of. That Lin Yi's strength is not to be underestimated. Do you know how many moves he used to turn me into this state? Shui Jianfeng continued to strike while the iron was hot. How many moves? Yu Taitsong asked subconsciously. 1 move. I had no power to resist in front of him. My left arm was forced to be crippled. In order to lure the other party to take the bait, Shui Jianfeng spoke the rare truth this time. He smiled bitterly. Although your strength is much stronger than mine, to tell you the truth, even if you completely recover your strength at the peak of the middle nascent soul stage, you still may not be that Lin Yi's opponent. At that time, no matter what you do, you will have to look at an outsider's face. Can you bear it or not? Is this true? Yu Taitsong immediately sucked in a breath of cold air, easily finishing off a peak early nascent soul stage expert in one move, and moreover making the other party unable to resist. Even if he recovered to his peak state, he still wouldn't be able to do it. Absolutely true, you will know once you ask. Xue Jianfeng spoke with certainty. Although family scandals should not be spread, this matter had, after all, happened in public. There were too many people who knew, and Yu Taitsong was not one of them. In this way, the last line of defense in Yu Taitsong's heart finally loosened. On one hand, there was the temptation of a nascent soul stage expert, and on the other hand, there was the unfathomable threat of Lin Yi. There was no use for him to continue staying on the snowy peak. After all, what was the use of recuperating? All right, this old man agrees. Yu Taitsong quickly made a decision. Great, let's go down the mountain, quietly now. I will bring you to my superior. Xue Jianfeng was instantly overjoyed. This time he could finally atone for his mistake. Coming down from the snowy peak, the two concealed their auras and quietly left the territory of the Snow Sword faction, heading straight for K. Luo Mountain. The entire Snow Sword faction was completely unaware of this. As for Lin Yi, he was personally treating Bing Wuqing's injuries. Previously, when she was in seclusion, she was ambushed by Xue Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's injuries were too serious. This was no longer something that could be cured with a recover pill. If it was not treated carefully, it was very likely that there would be repercussions. Fortunately, Lin Yi was here. This little injury was nothing to him. After the treatment, Bing Wuqing went into seclusion again. With the effects of the supreme grade condensing nascent pill, she quickly advanced to the next level and became a peak early nascent soul stage expert. In this way, he once again stepped on Xue Jianfeng. With the gap between their innate talents and foundations, it was impossible for Xue Jianfeng to be a match for him at the same level. There was no doubt about this. Bing Wuqing's successful advancement made Lin Yi feel slightly relieved. He had been accompanying Lung Lung all this while. Other than the first few days when the two of them had fun, it was Lin Yi who guided Lung Lung in her cultivation. It was not just about the realm level, but more importantly, the development of the shattered ice physique. After all, the two trump cards, including the prison drawing and the shattered ice prison mirror, were developed by Lin Yi's help. Of course, with Lung Lung's level of comprehension, she could explore on her own. However, she did not have Lin Yi's experience and vision, so it was inevitable that she would take some detours. Moreover, it was difficult to see any immediate results in a short period of time. Therefore, even if there was some suspicion of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm, Lin Yi still took the job of guiding and coaching her step by step. The center was watching covetously, and it was impossible for him to stay by Lung Lung's side all the time. Finding a way to improve Lung Lung's strength as much as possible was the only way. However, even so, Lung Lang's strength could not be improved to a level where she could truly protect herself in a short period of time, especially when facing an opponent like Xue Jianfeng, who was in the nascent soul stage. She really did not have many choices. It could only be said that she had Bing Wuqing by her side to take care of her. Unless the other party had some explosive improvement in strength, Bing Wuqing's current strength should be enough. Chapter 5382. It wasn't that Lin Yi was in a hurry to leave, but as an outsider staying in Snow Sword sect for such a long time, it was inevitable that people would criticize him. In particular, the way he appeared was too eye-catching. It was only natural that people would say that he had ulterior motives. Don't look at how Hong Qingyuan and the others were all respectful, like grandsons in front of him. In fact, they were all on guard in private, afraid that Lin Yi would have any ill intentions. With their strength, they wouldn't be able to withstand it. Looking at the way Tian Shui Jianfeng was dealt with, even Grand Elder Yu Taitsong might not be able to handle it. They still didn't know that Yu Taitsong had already followed Shui Jianfeng to K. Luo Mountain. At this time, if Lin Yi had any bad intentions, no one in Snow Sword Sect would stop him. Fortunately, Lin Yi didn't think about that at all. Apart from dealing with the expansion of the center, he basically came to the ancient small Jianghu as a tourist. If it weren't for Chen Jiao and Qin Dongqing, who were so stupid, he didn't even think about controlling the Green Cloud Sect in the North Island, let alone the Snow Sword Sect. After leaving Snow Sword Sect, Lin Yi didn't directly return to the Blue Cloud Sect in the north, with Xianijia controlling the situation, plus Hong Zijuan's assistance. Especially since the biggest variable, Qin Jiao, had been eliminated, the Chen family's high and mighty faction had now fallen apart. Even if the remaining people wanted to cause trouble, they didn't have the strength to do so. There was nothing to worry about the Blue Cloud Sect in the north, since it was rare for him to come to Middle Island. Apart from visiting cold, Lin Yi also planned to take a look around. He wanted to experience the customs of this Jianghu, as well as investigate the strength of the top figures, so that he could make corresponding countermeasures in the future. As for Lin Yi's next destination, it was Yiling Sect. He was going to Yiling Sect to see Duanmuyu. After the wonderful experience in the ancient trial, their relationship had far exceeded the scope of ordinary friends. Now that he had come to Middle Island, he should go. K. Luo Mountain was originally an ownerless land, but now it had been turned into a central base by Dr. Glasses and the others. Although it was still in its embryonic form, it was already beginning to take shape. It was just like a replica of the central headquarters in the secular world, but the overall structure was very secretive. If they didn't know about the Dark Clan's inner circle, even if there were disciples from the far ancient era who barged into the Dark Clan, they wouldn't be able to notice anything amiss. In a huge underground chamber, there were 5 ice coffins neatly arranged. Each ice coffin had a person lying in it. From left to right, they were Qin Jiao, Qin Dongqing, Lu Pinggan, and Shui Jianfeng. The last one was Yu Taitsong. Snow Sword Sect's Grand Elder, Yu Taitsong, was now like Shui Jianfeng, already a member of the Corps. Actually, when he had first followed Shui Jianfeng to K. Luo Mountain, Yu Taitsong hadn't completely made up his mind to join the center. Although he was indeed a little moved after hearing Shui Jianfeng's words, his attitude at that time was still mainly half-believing and half-doubting. However, when he saw Chen Jiu and the other 2 lying in the ice coffins, especially when he found out that Chen Dongcheng and Lu Pinggan, the 2 high-level gold core cultivators of the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, who he had dealings with before, had now stepped into the peak of the early Yuanying stage, Yu Taitsong was completely shocked. After the shock, the next thing was simple. Since the center had proved that they had the ability to produce Yuanying stage old monsters in batches, then it was naturally not difficult to imagine that they could promote people to the peak of Yuanying stage. Yu Taitsong didn't hesitate for too long and quickly accepted the invitation of the Glasses Doctor. On the surface, it was like this. In fact, if people like Yu Taitsong said that they would completely submit to the center all at once, the probability of this happening was not to say that it was impossible. But it was absolutely negligible. This was a mutual use. When he reached the peak of Yuanying stage, there would be no one stronger than him in the world. At that time, no one could stop him from leaving this mysterious organization. This was Yu Taitsong's real thoughts. After all, the center was too secretive. Even if they had agreed to join on the surface, it could not be said that there was any degree of recognition in private. At most, it was just an organization with great value. Someone like Yu Taitsong, who was used to being aloof and powerful, would not easily surrender. Little did he know that from the moment he agreed, Yu Taitsong was destined to be unable to get rid of the shadow of the center. How could the benefits of the center be so easy to take? Looking at the 5 ice coffins in front of him, the Glasses Doctor was in a good mood. The expansion plan to enter the small, ancient underworld, although it was still in the early stage of preparation, was unexpectedly smooth. If this development continued, it would not take long to replicate the successful precedent of Heaven Stage Island, and it could be foreseen that this side would definitely be able to control the overall situation faster than Dr. Luan. After all, the strength level of the small ancient underworld was far worse than that of Heaven Stage Island. With a great contribution, from now on he would be able to truly rise to the top of the center. The glasses doctor thought happily Shuanya Lake. This was not the largest lake in the Middle Island, but it was definitely the most famous lake in the entire Middle Island and even in the small ancient underworld. At the same time, it was also recognized as one of the most unfathomable places. The reason was very simple, because this was the base of the Yiling sect. A large number of pavilions were all built in the middle of the lake. This was the most unique aspect of the Yiling sect. This alone was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. After all, this not only required a lot of manpower and financial resources, but also a series of special protective formations and other supporting facilities. This kind of extravagance was not something that an ordinary sect could afford. Although the Yiling sect had been passed down for thousands of years, it had always been lacking in disciples. Compared to the other large ancient sects, the number of disciples was at most 1/3 or even less. However, it had always firmly occupied the position of one of the 10 small sects, which was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. The scenery is really good. It's a good place to play. Lin Yi reclined in a small boat and slowly approached the pavilion in the middle of the lake. He could not help but feel relaxed and happy as he looked at the surrounding scenery of the water and sky. Duan Muyu had not mentioned much about the Yiling sect before, but he had more or less mentioned it when they were chatting. Shuanya Lake was one of the famous places in the small ancient underworld, and this reputation was not given for nothing. The person driving the boat was a middle-aged man. When he saw Lin Yi's relaxed expression, he could not help but ask, "Sir, are you just a tourist?" "You can say that, but I'm mainly here to see a friend. Judging from your attire, you should be an outer disciple of the Yiling sect. You know Duan Muyu, right?" Lin Yi asked casually. Chapter 5383. Now he was only at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. His strength and aptitude were not good enough. He didn't even have the chance to go to the secular world and the primordial trial. According to the rules, he naturally had to call Duan Muyu eldest senior sister. Lin Yi nodded. The man's surprised reaction was not strange. Duan Muyu was a famous person in Yiling sect, and she was recognized as the person who would take over the sect in the future. Ordinary people probably couldn't get close to her even if they wanted to. "May I know your name?" the middle-aged man asked quickly after the surprise. "Lin Yi." Lin, he said his name, and after thinking about it, he added his background, North Island Blue Cloud Sect. As one of the 10 small sects and families, North Island Blue Cloud Sect and Yiling sect didn't have a good relationship, but they still had some connections. It should be more convenient to use this identity. "You're Lin Yi." The middle-aged man's reaction was even more strange. "Why, have you heard of me?" Lin Yi was stunned, but then he felt relieved. After experiencing those things in the secular world, his name had long been known to everyone. After these people came back, they inevitably talked about some interesting things with their fellow disciples. It was not strange that the man had heard of his name. Well, the middle-aged man nodded with a strange expression, and then didn't say anything more. When they reached the shore, he led Lin Yi to the door of the pavilion on water. After telling Lin Yi to wait at the door, he quickly went in to report. After a while, the middle-aged man came out, but Lin Yi didn't see Duan Muyu. "Come with me." The middle-aged man glanced at Lin Yi and then led him into a small path next to the pavilion. Lin Yi looked around and couldn't help but be surprised. At the end of the path was a long staircase. It didn't lead up but down. The key was that it was extremely deep, dozens of meters deep. It should have reached the bottom of the lake. That was not all. After reaching the bottom, there was another long tunnel. After walking in the tunnel for 2 hours, the middle-aged man suddenly stopped. Eldest senior sister is in front. You can go in. She lives here. Lin Yi frowned a little. There was an iron gate in front of him. He didn't know what was behind the iron gate for the time being, but normal people wouldn't like to live in such a deep and secluded place. He didn't notice that Duan Muyu had such a hobby after getting along with her before. For now, the middle-aged man was non-committal. Thank you very much. Lin Yi nodded. Of course, he sensed that something was amiss, but he came here to see Duan Muyu. Since the other party said that Duan Muyu was inside, there was no reason for him to shrink back at this time. Without thinking too much, Lin immediately pushed open the door and strode in. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, Lin immediately understood what was going on. It was a formation. There was no doubt that this was a formation, and it should be a special formation for trapping people. After discovering this, Lin Yi's first reaction was not to frown. Instead, he couldn't help but want to laugh. As soon as he arrived at the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he was tricked into entering the heaven-climbing formation. Now he came to Yiling's sect and entered another formation. It seemed that the level was also not low. What kind of fate was this? Linny, why are you here? Soon, Duan Muyu's joyful voice came from the front. This was a medium-sized secret room, complete with tables and chairs. At this time, Duan Muyu was sitting on the bed in a daze. When he heard the door open, he thought it was another fellow disciple of the same sect. It wasn't until he saw Lin Yi's appearance that he realized it was him. He was overjoyed. It's rare for me to come to Middle Island. I came to see you. Lin Yi smiled casually. He looked at the iron gate that was closed again behind him, and then carefully looked at Duan Muyu. He sighed with emotion. I haven't seen you for a few months, and you've lost a lot of weight. Are you losing weight in seclusion? Duan Muyu originally had a lot to say, but she burst out laughing when she heard this. Losing weight is losing weight. Why would I need to go into seclusion? Besides, how am I fat? No matter how much of a tomboy she was, she still couldn't escape the nature of a woman. Duan Muyu wouldn't tolerate herself becoming a fat girl. Moreover, she had nothing to do with the word fat. At most, her figure was more fit and beautiful. Moreover, it was the light and graceful kind of fit and beautiful. Then why did you find such a strange and weird place to go into seclusion? Or is this where you usually live, your boudoir? Lin Yi smiled. Their relationship had unknowingly become very close after going through the primeval trials. Although it wasn't quite the same as Kult and the others, they spoke as if they were old friends. There wasn't a need to be too particular. Do you think so? Duan Muyu rolled her eyes in amusement. Although this place had all kinds of furniture, there were no small decorations that a girl's boudoir should have. There wasn't even a decent mirror. No matter how much of a tomboy she was, Duan Mu, you would not need a mirror. Which girl's boudoir didn't have a mirror? Not really, but with your style, it's not impossible. Lin Yi grinned. I'm not that careless. Duan Muyu snorted and then explained. This is a detention room. It's specially used for disciples who have committed crimes. What crime did you commit? Lin Yi asked. Divine knowledge grass. Duan Muyu spat out 3 words. What crime did you commit? Lin Yi was even more puzzled. I don't know why, but the higher-ups of the sect found out that I obtained the divine knowledge grass. Moreover, someone asked me to hand over the divine knowledge grass in public, but I refused. Duan Muyu said calmly. Hand over the divine knowledge grass? Your Yiling sect has such a rule? Lin Yi frowned. Usually, no matter what kind of treasure the disciple got during the test, it belonged to the disciple himself, and there was no such thing as handing it over to the sect. There was no such thing in the common world, and there was no such thing in the heavenly island, and it was the same in the ancient small world. Otherwise, it would be a huge blow to the disciples' enthusiasm. Who would be willing to risk their lives for treasures then? No, but the situation this time is special. After all, the divine knowledge grass is not an ordinary treasure. Duan Muyu shook her head. That was what she said, but it was impossible for her to hand over the divine knowledge grass just like that. It was one thing to be loyal to Yi Ling's sect, but it was another to hand over something that belonged to her without any principles. Speaking of which, who did you hear about the divine knowledge grass from? Lin Yi suddenly asked. Chapter 5384. There are not many people who know that the divine knowledge grass is produced in the primordial trial land, and there are even fewer people who know that you have obtained the divine knowledge grass. If there is really someone behind this, the only people who are really suspicious are these few people. Lin Yi nodded. That's impossible. My master had been in retreat long before I participated in the secular world experience and has not come out until now. He doesn't know that I have obtained the divine knowledge grass at all. What's more, he has always treated me like his own daughter. He would never target me in this kind of thing. Duan Muyu shook his head decisively. That's easy to say. If I remember correctly, there are only 3 people from your Yi Ling sect participating in the secular world experience this time, including you, right? Lin Yi asked. And apart from me, there are only 2 junior brothers, Qiu Mingcheng and Su Fei. Duan Muyu nodded. Yi Ling's sect had a small population, and there were many thresholds for participating in the primordial trial. This time, they only sent 3 people, which was the least among all the 10 small sects and families participating. How strong are these 2 people? Lin Yi continued to ask. Qiu Mingcheng is at the peak of the foundation establishment late stage, and his strength is quite good. As for Su Fei, although his talent is good, he has only joined the sect for a short time and is currently only at the foundation establishment early stage. At this point, Duan Muyu had somewhat understood what Lin Yi meant, and his eyes suddenly lit up. You mean when I gave you the half of the divine knowledge grass, although there were only a few of us present. After all, there were too many people. It is not surprising that some people inadvertently leaked the news. In your sect, the most likely people to know about this situation are your 2 junior brothers. Of course, we cannot rule out the possibility that they will leak it to others after they return, but the biggest suspects are definitely the 2 of them. Lin Yi analyzed. So you think the biggest suspects are Qiu Mingcheng and Su Fei? Duan Muyu pondered. Yes, there is no love without reason in this world, and naturally, there is no hatred without reason. If someone is really scheming against you behind your back, then they must be plotting something. Through this method, they shouldn't be able to obtain the spiritual knowledge grass for the time being, so it must involve other interests. Lin Yi didn't need to say anything else. Su Fei's strength is too low, and he has no enmity with me, nor does he have any conflict of interest with me. He can basically be ruled out as a suspect. As for Qiu Mingcheng, Duan Muyu frowned and said slowly, he's actually much more experienced in Yi Ling's sect than I am. When I first joined the sect, he was already the 2nd senior brother. It's just that he hasn't had a breakthrough all these years, so I've caught up to him. But in private, I'm afraid he still has some thoughts. In that case, this Qiu Mingcheng is indeed suspicious. He instigated you to hand over the spiritual knowledge grass. If you compromised and handed it over, then even if there was no substantial benefit to him, at least you would suffer a big blow, lest the gap between you widen. If he refused to hand it over, as he was doing now, he would gain even more benefits. As long as the matter was blown up, he could plan well. It's not impossible to take over eldest senior brother's position. Lin Yi nodded. Just like now, Duan Muyu was put in confinement. For a leading figure in the sect, this was already a very serious punishment, especially since this might just be the beginning. Maybe. Duan Muyu sighed. Although she sat in the position of Yi Ling's sect's eldest senior sister, she always knew that sooner or later she would become a very important member of the sect's senior management. If everything went well, she might become the successor of the sect leader in the future. At least on the surface, this was how the senior management cultivated her. However, she did not have much desire for power. Even the masculinity she usually showed was inclined towards the chivalrous style of wielding a sword and singing. She never thought of becoming a scheming sect leader. Unfortunately, this kind of thing was not something that she could ignore. If she did not think about it, others would think about it. For example, if Chiu Ming-chung, who was suppressed by her, was a guy who deliberately wanted to rise to the top, then he would definitely regard her as a thorn in his side. In this situation, it was almost natural for him to take advantage of this opportunity. There was nothing difficult to understand. Then what are you going to do now? Lin Yi sat down calmly and poured himself a cup of tea. Although this was a confinement place, except for the relatively claustrophobic environment, everything else was not bad. It could be considered a good room in an inn outside. I don't know. Duan Muyu shook her head. Based on her original character, even if she couldn't be considered to be decisive in killing, she would definitely do things in a clean and efficient manner. She rarely hesitated, but the current situation really put her in a difficult position. Even if it could be confirmed that Chiu Ming-chung was behind this, what could she do? Not to mention that she was now in confinement and could not get out at all. Even if she really had a chance to get out, it would be useless. Could she confront Chiu Ming-chung face to face? The other party used an overt scheme. Now that the people who wanted the divine knowledge grass were the entire Yiling sect's senior management, what was the use of confronting them? To put it bluntly, at this moment, there were only two options left for Duan Muyu. Either hand over the divine knowledge grass, or keep the divine knowledge grass, that was all. There were pros and cons to handing it over, and there were pros and cons to keeping it. It all depended on how she weighed the pros and cons. Of course, Duan Muyu's personality tended to be straightforward. She might not have really weighed the pros and cons before making a decision. It might just be based on her personal preferences. After a moment of silence, Duan Muyu raised her head in a somewhat embarrassed and apologetic manner. You came to see me with good intentions, but I didn't expect you to be dragged into this, or... It was easy to guess what she was going to say next. If she was alone, she could continue to hold on and not give in. At worst, she could just treat it as a retreat. But now it involved Lin Yi. If Lin Yi was also locked up here because of her, it would not be right. Don't. If you change your original intention and hand over the divine knowledge grass for me, I won't agree. Lin Yi interrupted. There was a large pile of divine knowledge grass roots in the space of the jade pendant. He did not care about Duan Muyu's half of the divine knowledge grass at all. According to their relationship, Duan Muyu handed over her half of the divine knowledge grass, and then Lin Yi would compensate her with a large piece of the divine knowledge grass root. After all, they had agreed to split it in half at the beginning, but Duan Muyu insisted. Chapter 5385. But you are also trapped here and can't get out. This is not a good idea, right? Duan Muyu frowned. She also thought that the sect's higher-ups might take the initiative to let Lin Yi out, but this was unlikely. Perhaps in the eyes of those people, Lin Yi was a bargaining chip sent to their door, exchanging the divine knowledge grass for Lin Yi's freedom. This kind of proposal might have already been put forward for discussion. Lin Yi glanced around with an indifferent expression. It's okay. You don't have to mind. This was the truth. He was now a genuine Yuan Shin of the mysterious ascending stage. Even the one-step to heaven array couldn't trap him. This unknown array naturally couldn't trap him either. After all, the one-step to heaven array was personally set up by the legendary Great Emperor. No matter how great the background of this array was, it would be difficult to match it. How can I not mind? Duan Muyu smiled bitterly, but then she thought about it. In the river of spiritual knowledge, even a terrifying existence like Jiuying was subdued by Lin Yi. This might really be a small matter for him. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt a lot more at ease. Let's not talk about this. Anyway, we have nothing to do. Why don't we do something? Lin Yi suddenly suggested. While they were talking, he had carefully explored the array that trapped the two of them. It was not much different from the one step to heaven array. It was a relatively tricky array, but with his strength it would not be a problem for him to get out. If he spent a little more effort, he could even uproot this array. However, that would be equivalent to completely falling out with Yi Ling's sect. Judging from Duan Muyu's attitude, she probably did not want to go to that step. Otherwise, she would not have stayed here and done nothing. She even deliberately left the divine knowledge grass untouched. Do something? Seeing Lin Yi's gaze falling on her, even Duan Muyu could not help but shiver. She was a man, but after all, she was still a girl. Especially in this situation, a man and a woman alone in a room. Anyone would have a perverted thought. It's rare to see you. I want to take this opportunity to help you break through to the Jedon stage, and also help you refine the spiritual awareness grass. It's a small gift. Why are you blushing? Lin Yi asked curiously. He had been with Duan Muyu for a while now, and this manly woman didn't blush often. Duan Muyu suddenly felt embarrassed. Just now, the scene in the mirror world where she was hugged by Lin Yi in a disheveled state unconsciously appeared in her mind. At that time, she acted extremely carefree, but now that she thought about it, she inevitably felt a little embarrassed, especially in this kind of situation. At this moment, the metal door suddenly opened, and a young man with a slightly tanned face stood outside. Without Duan Muyu's reminder, Lin Yi only needed a glance to recognize him. This person was Chiu Mingchong. The sect master and the elders asked me to come over and ask, what is eldest senior sister's decision? Chiu Mingchong's eyes fell on Lin Yi. No, Duan Muyu's answer was simple and direct. Chiu Mingchong was not surprised by this. He had come over to ask the same question every few days, and now he was used to it, but this time he did not turn around and walk away. Instead, he continued, Okay, but the higher-ups specifically told me another thing. Eldest senior sister, you said before that there was only half of the spiritual awareness grass in your hand, so the remaining half of the spiritual awareness grass is most likely with Lin Yi. Since he has come to our Yi Ling sect this time, I hope he can return it to its rightful owner. Return it to its rightful owner? Lin Yi was not surprised that the other party wanted him. But returning it to its rightful owner, what did this mean? Yes, the spiritual awareness grass has been a treasure of our Yi Ling sect since ancient times, and it is only clearly recorded in the ancient books of our Yi Ling sect. So, is there anything wrong with saying that it should be returned to its rightful owner? Chiu Mingchong said. Lin Yi was stunned for a long time when he heard this. Was it really appropriate to say such a shameless statement so openly? If there is information about the spiritual awareness grass in your family's ancient books, then all the spiritual awareness grass in the world can only belong to your family. What kind of weird logic was this? Duan Muyu, who was on the side, blushed a little and held his forehead. Even in his own family, these words were at most a joke, but now they were directly used to mock Lin Yi. Wasn't he ashamed? The sect master said that Yi Ling sect and the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island have always had a good relationship. He doesn't want to hurt the relationship between the two sects because of this matter. So as long as you can hand over the spiritual awareness grass, then nothing will happen, and we will naturally treat you well and thank you. Chiu Mingchong continued to add, That's... Lin Yi thought about it and concluded, The reason you gave me isn't very flattering, but I get the gist of it. I'm in a situation where I'm being held captive, and the only way to redeem myself is to hand over the spirit grass. Is that what you mean? Duan Muyu almost laughed out loud, and Chiu Mingchong's face was a little ugly, but he still nodded and said, Your Excellency must be joking, but in general, you are not wrong. I believe that Your Excellency should be a smart person who knows how to adapt to the situation, right? Of course I know how to adapt to the situation. Unfortunately, the half of the spiritual awareness grass that you want is not with me at all. I gave it to Bing Wuqing. If you want it, you might as well go directly to Snow Sword Sect to find him. Anyway, it's not far from here. Lin Yi said casually. What? Chiu Ming Chong was shocked when he heard this, and his face was obviously filled with disbelief. How can such an important thing as the spiritual awareness grass be given to an unrelated outsider? Your Excellency must be joking. He had only heard in private that Lin Yi had obtained the spiritual awareness grass, and Duan Muyu had gotten half. As for the specific situation, he was not clear about it. Naturally, he thought that Lin Yi had kept the other half for himself. The two of them had been together since the primordial trial, and they were a living pair. After obtaining the spiritual awareness grass, by chance, they divided it in half. This kind of thing could be said to be logical. Unfortunately, Chiu Ming Chong did not know that the most important thing about the spiritual awareness grass was not the spiritual awareness grass, but the huge spiritual awareness grass root. Not only did he not know about this, but even the senior members of Yi Ling's sect did not know about this. After all, there were no records of this in the ancient books. Otherwise, Chiu Ming Chong would have asked for the spiritual awareness grass root and would not have stared at a mere half of the spiritual awareness grass. Am I familiar with you? Lin Yi asked. No, not familiar. Chiu Ming Chong was stunned, and his face was inexplicable. Chapter 5386. Just you wait. Chiu Ming Chong left in a hurry after saying those 3 words. He was obviously going to ask the higher-ups of the sect for instructions. Not long after, he returned. The sect leader said that since you said that you gave the consciousness grass to Bing Wuqing, we can believe it. But to prove your sincerity, he hopes that you can write a letter and ask Bing Wuqing to come over. This shouldn't be a big problem, right? Okay. Lin Yi agreed without hesitation. He took the pen and paper and wrote a letter on the table. There was nothing special, and he didn't mention the consciousness grass. He simply asked Bing Wuqing to come to Yi Ling's sect. After he finished writing, he left the letter at the door for Chiu Ming Chong to rush in and take it. When the iron door was closed again, Duan Muyu couldn't help but ask in confusion, Why did you really write it? I'll write it if they want me to. It's not a big deal anyway. Lin Yi acted very indifferent. But aren't you leading Bing Wuqing into the fire pit for no reason? Duan Muyu was a little worried. She already knew that there was some kind of tacit understanding between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi during the primeval trial. Although she didn't know why there was such a tacit understanding, she was basically sure that Bing Wuqing should be on their side. Wasn't Lin Yi dragging his own people into this? Since it's a fire pit, let's jump into it together. It'll be more lively this way. Lin Yi chuckled. Duan Muyu knew that he was joking, but she couldn't laugh at this time. After a moment of silence, she said, I don't know what you're planning, but I don't want you to compromise with them because of me. You're the Grand Master of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, and the higher-ups of our Yi Ling sect aren't fools. As long as you insist on not agreeing, they won't do anything to you. They'll let you go sooner or later. What about you? Lin Yi asked. Me. At most, I'll stay in confinement here. It'll be a good, closed-door training. Duan Muyu didn't look like she was pretending to be relaxed. That was what she really thought. From her standpoint, she definitely didn't want to completely fall out with the sect, but with her personality, she wouldn't give in so easily. Then, she would just let the stalemate continue. It's really rare for a woman to have such a carefree temperament. Lin Yi casually praised and then said, Come, let's continue what we were doing just now. What is it? Duan Muyu was confused. Didn't I tell you? Since I have nothing to do, I can help you break through to the gold core stage. Don't you want to become a gold core stage expert and go out to scare them? Lin Yi said in a natural tone. Is that even possible? Duan Muyu's eyes lit up. If she had the chance, she certainly wanted to break through to the gold core stage. In fact, if she was an expert of the gold core stage, this incident would not have happened. The divine knowledge grass could only be used by gold core stage experts. However, she was only at foundation establishment great perfection now. This was the most important reason why the higher-ups asked her to hand over the divine knowledge grass. If she became a gold core stage expert, then this argument would naturally be untenable. It was just that with her own ability, she could only fantasize about this kind of thing. If she really wanted to break through to the gold core stage, she was actually not there yet. After all, strictly speaking, she had not advanced to foundation establishment great perfection for a long time. It had only been less than 2 years, and the key was that she didn't have the conditions. Without a gold core stage in hand, how could it be easy to break through to the gold core stage? What's impossible about it? Lin, he said as he took out a handful of medicinal pills. Duan Muyu was dumbfounded at a glance. They were all gold cores, golden pills, and each one had a halo on it. They were all F*King top grade. This time, Lin Yi's main purpose for coming to Yiling's sect was to give her some gold cores, golden pills. After all, they were friends who had gone through life and death together. With Lin Yi's character, he would not mistreat such a reliable, true friend. All for me? Duan Muyu looked at the handful of gold cores, golden pills that the other party stuffed into her hand and was dumbfounded. She knew that Lin Yi was a generous person, but it was a little shocking for him to be this generous. These were top-grade gold cores, golden pills. Yes, you don't have to eat them all at once. For now, eating 2 should be enough, Lin Yi said. 2. Duan Muyu was shocked when she heard this. She knew that the higher the grade of the medicinal pill, the more it should not be eaten, especially top-grade gold cores, golden pills. With her current realm, eating 1 would take all her energy to digest the incomparably huge medicinal power in it. Eating 2 at once would really kill her. Don't worry, of course you can't eat 2 when you're alone. But with me here, it'll be fine. I can help you guide the medicinal power. Lin Yi explained. He knew that Duan Muyu hadn't completely touched the barrier between foundation building and golden core. He hadn't reached the point where he could really break through to the golden core stage yet. It might not be safe if he only ate 1 supreme grade golden core, but if he ate 2, then it wouldn't be a problem. Is it really possible? Duan Muyu was still a little incredulous. She had never heard of eating 2 top-grade gold cores, golden pills in a row. As for letting someone guide the medicinal power during the breakthrough process, it was even more unheard of. This kind of thing was completely contrary to her common sense. Yes. Lin Yi nodded and did not explain much. Okay, then let's begin. Duan Muyu agreed very quickly. After the magical experience in the Archean trial, even if her trust in Lin Yi was not as blind as Song Lingshan and the others, it was not much different. After all, this was a mystic ascension stage existence that Jiao Ying personally admitted. Compared to this, what really made her hesitate was actually the top-grade golden pills themselves. The value of so many top-grade golden pills did not need to be mentioned at all. It was much more valuable than the consciousness grass. A person like her, who clearly distinguished between kindness and hatred, would generally never accept favors from others, especially such an exaggerated favor, just like how she did not want a big pile of consciousness grass before, and in the end, she only wanted half a piece of consciousness grass, because this was the only thing she had agreed with Lin Yi in advance. But unexpectedly, she did not hesitate for too long on this, and did not even symbolically reject it, and directly accepted Lin Yi's gift. Lin Yi did not know what she had thought through, but he did not find it strange, because Duan Muyu was originally a very free and easy woman. Duan Muyu slightly adjusted her breath, trying to adjust her state to the best. This process did not take much time, because she had been doing this all this time. Then, she stuffed the 2 top-grade golden pills into her mouth without hesitation. Chapter 5387. The incomparably huge medicinal power erupted in an instant. Lin Yi gently placed his hands on her back and was about to guide the medicinal power for her. However, with a bang, Duan Muyu's clothes suddenly exploded. Looking at the beautiful body that was suddenly exposed in front of him, Lin Yi's first reaction was to be dumbfounded, and then he couldn't help but smile bitterly. "I've gone too far," hearing the somewhat awkward voice coming from behind. Duan Muyu's body couldn't help but tighten. After all, she was a woman. If it weren't for the fact that she couldn't be distracted at this time, she would have already crawled into a hole in the ground. No matter how much of a tomboy she was, no matter how close she was to Lin Yi, a girl's pure body being seen cleanly by Lin Yi, with his hands on her back as well. This situation was simply... Her face was so red that it seemed like it was dripping blood, but Duan Muyu finally forced herself to calm down. Although she was ashamed, she couldn't regret it now. She could only risk it and continue to break through to the gold core stage. Otherwise, the incomparably majestic medicinal power in her body would instantly drown her. At that time, not to mention her pure body, she would even lose her life. At this time, Lin Yi was quite embarrassed. He really didn't mean it. He knew that the medicinal power of 2 supreme-grade gold cores would be very strong, and he was prepared to guide it in this regard. Logically speaking, such an embarrassing accident shouldn't happen. However, the problem was that he suddenly found that the meridians in Duan Muyu's body absorbed the medicinal power at a speed that was almost 10 times faster than ordinary people. This was like pouring water into a bucket. Although the amount of water was the same in the end, the original intention was to use a small ladle to scoop in, but he didn't expect that it would suddenly become a large bucket of water to be lifted up and poured directly into it. This was completely unexpected. The legendary leaf vein. Lin Yi mumbled thoughtfully. The so-called leaf vein was just a legend, and everyone's meridians were the same. Even if there were some special people, their meridians were more or less the same. As for this so-called leaf vein, it wasn't something that Lin Yi was familiar with. As for this so-called leaf vein, in terms of the structure of the meridians alone, there was no difference from ordinary people. Otherwise, he would have discovered it when he treated Duan Muyu last time. The structure was the same, but under certain special circumstances, the ability it displayed was completely different. For example, a normal meridian needed some time to absorb such a large amount of medicinal power, but for a leaf meridian, it was done in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, all the medicinal energy was squeezed into the meridians of Duan Muyu's body, which was why such a charming yet awkward scene had occurred. The powerful medicinal energy instantly burst out from every pore of his meridians, and his clothes were naturally torn apart. Lin Yi could be said to be unprepared for this, but fortunately, he was now a real profound ascending stage primordial spirit, even if the strength of the primordial spirit body was not enough. However, with his method of guiding the medicinal effects in the other party's body, it was more than enough. At most, the other party would be caught off guard. By the time the other party reacted, he would be able to easily control the situation. Time passed bit by bit. With Lin Yi's assistance, Duan Muyu's absorption of the medicinal efficacy was very smooth. By the time the medicinal efficacy was completely digested, it was already 3 days later. Duan Muyu suddenly opened her eyes, and a brand new aura slowly released from her body. There was a sincere smile on her face. The effect of 2 top-grade golden cores was really not in vain. In 3 days, it helped her successfully break through to the golden core stage. The key was not the early golden core stage. It was the peak of the early golden core stage. This surprise was a little unexpected, but it was also reasonable. After all, whether it was her talent or heritage, she was by no means a mediocre person. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was a genius. Since she ate 2 top-grade golden cores at once, it was not surprising that she had advanced 2 levels in a row. Congratulations. Lin Yi's voice sounded behind her. Duan Muyu was about to respond, but when she looked down, she suddenly remembered that she was still naked. Her face suddenly turned red, but before she could do anything, Lin Yi behind her had already handed over half of the divine knowledge grass. Strike while the iron is hot. Eat it. Oh, Duan Muyu subconsciously took it and hesitated for a moment. but she forgot the embarrassment of not wearing clothes. "You're not thinking of handing it over, are you?" Lin Yi asked curiously. "That's not it, but—" Duan Muyu was not an indecisive person, but this matter was indeed of great importance to her. Now the entire sect's higher-ups were forcing her to hand over this half of the divine knowledge grass. Although she had put on an attitude of refusing to cooperate, if she ate the divine knowledge grass just like that, there would be no room for negotiation. Once they fell out, it would be equivalent to betraying the sect. With her feelings for Yi Ling's sect, of course, she did not want to go to such an irreparable point. "You're now a golden core stage master, so it's natural for you to eat the divine knowledge grass. No one can say anything about it. Besides, I'm here no matter what happens. I can always support you. You won't lose control." Lin Yi's tone was very firm, and there was a sense of condescension. He was not targeting Duan Muyu, but the entire Yi Ling sect. Ever since he recovered his primordial spirit to the profound ascension stage, and was able to kill a nascent soul stage old monster with one move of the soul-hooking hand, this feeling naturally appeared. After all, for the entire ancient small Jianghu, he was originally an existence that stood above the rules. Then, okay. Duan Muyu finally nodded. Being submissive was not her style. Otherwise, things would not have come to this point today. Since the divine knowledge grass was hers, what was the harm in eating it? As she spoke, Duan Muyu took the divine knowledge grass and stuffed it directly into her mouth. Then, her whole body stiffened again. There was no longer the embarrassment of not wearing clothes in her mind. Only 2 words were left in her mind. Great pain, great pain. The indescribable pain surged like a tide, instantly engulfing her whole body. At this time, everything was not important. Strength and skills were not important. The only thing that could support her was her willpower. Because of her willpower, she was like a reef in the monstrous waves of pain. Time seemed to be extraordinarily long at this time. "I'm a little reckless." A trace of regret suddenly appeared in Duan Muyu's consciousness. After holding on for a long time, she found that she could not hold on any longer. Chapter 5388. In short, Duan Muyu's opening method was wrong. So the current situation was basically the same as when her clothes exploded before. If it was someone else, even if it was a master of the Yuanying stage, Duan Muyu would definitely die at this moment. Fortunately, there was a profound ascending stage primordial spirit sitting behind her. In the small Jianghu of the ancient times, this was almost the existence of a master of the spiritual awareness. More importantly, this guy knew the entire refining process of the spiritual awareness grass. After all, since he came to the small ancient world, Lin Yi had to take a bite of the spiritual awareness grass almost every day to assist in his cultivation. In the first month, he still felt unbearable pain, but by now he had basically become accustomed to it. He was probably the first weirdo in history to eat the spiritual awareness grass as a daily snack. Pain was pain, but in his eyes, this thing was similar to coffee. Apart from the pain, it was quite fragrant and refreshing. Lin Yi unsurprisingly took over the turbulent and spectacular tide of pain for Duan Muyu, but he did not directly erase it for her. That way, there would be no effect of refining the spiritual awareness. He just suppressed it to a certain extent rhythmically, and then released it little by little. In this way, it was within the range of Duan Muyu's tolerance, and at the same time it could maximize the effect of refining the spiritual awareness. In this way, another day and night passed, and Duan Muyu struggled out of the endless sea of pain. It was just one day. This time was far from long for others, and it was not worth mentioning for cultivators who had been in seclusion for decades. But if they were in Duan Muyu's situation, it would definitely be extremely long, because this was really like a year. The amazing perseverance that Duan Muyu showed on this day, even Lin, he couldn't help but be surprised. Although he had suppressed the tide of pain, the total amount of half of the spiritual awareness grass was still there. Even if it was released in a controlled manner, the degree of pain was still far above the usual. After all, Duan Yu had only used one day to deal with the pain that others would need at least half a month to endure. She was able to do it without a sound, and Lin Yi couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. Young lady, you really are a man. Phew, like a marathon that had finally come to the finish line. Duan Yu let out a long sigh of relief. At this time, her entire body had been soaked in sweat countless times, and her image had been completely thrown to the back of her mind. Her tense spirit for the whole day relaxed a little, and her whole body fell back. Lin Yi was stunned. Duan Yu was too tired to care about his image, but he was not tired at all. Especially in the past few days, he had been openly admiring Duan Yu's clean and beautiful back. It was inevitable that some charming thoughts would arise in his heart, but he had been very good at restraining himself. But now, Duan Yu suddenly fell backward and directly crashed into his arms. Lin Yi didn't even have a chance to react. He then stared blankly at the beautiful scenery in front of him. Previously, he could only see his back, but now he could even see his front clearly. Pink. This thought flashed across Lin Yi's mind, and then he met Duan Yu's eyes. Ah, Duan Yu finally came to her senses at this moment. She quickly covered her chest and sat up again. She hurriedly tried to find clothes to cover her embarrassment. Unfortunately, the clothes on the ground had already been torn to pieces, and this place was the confinement room, not her boudoir. Naturally, there would be no clothes to change into. For a moment, she was like a headless fly and didn't know what to do. Lin Yi was also very embarrassed. It was fine if Duan Yu didn't move. He couldn't see too much. At most, he could only see her back. Now that she moved, it was even more beautiful, and he didn't know where to put his eyes. This kind of charming awkwardness didn't last long because Lin Yi suddenly reminded, "Hurry up and hide. Someone is coming outside." Duan Yu was stunned for a moment. This room was shrouded by the black water array. Logically speaking, it was impossible for anyone trapped in it to perceive the situation outside, because divine sense couldn't explore it all. But based on the absolute trust established before, she subconsciously reacted and hid on the bed and covered herself tightly with the quilt. In fact, she should have done this when she was helpless just now, but for some reason she actually froze. Thinking about it, it was very strange. Sure enough, as soon as Duan Yu hid under the quilt, the iron door was opened, and the person who came was still Chiu Ming-chung. Chiu Ming-chung stood at the door and was about to speak, but when he glanced at it, he was stunned. From his angle, although he couldn't see every corner of the room, he could still see it clearly. He clearly saw that Duan Yu was actually on the bed at this moment. A man and a woman were sharing a room. Although Lin Yi was still sitting on the side, Duan Yu actually ran to the bed. Anyone could imagine what had happened, not to mention a guy with a rich imagination like Chiu Ming-chung. Here's the chance. Chiu Ming-chung's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't insist on this matter. This time he didn't come to watch the show. Bing Wuqing will be here soon. Before that, I would like to give you a word of advice. I hope you can weigh what you should and shouldn't say. Again, as long as you can help Bing Wuqing hand over the God Knowledge Grass, you will be an honored guest of our Yiling sect. Everything will be negotiable, Chiu Ming-chung reminded. Sure, Lin Yi agreed readily. A wise man submits to circumstances. Then, we'll see your performance next. Chiu Ming-chung was very satisfied with Lin Yi's attitude. He had no enmity with Lin Yi in the past, and the only thing he wanted was the God Knowledge Grass. As long as Lin Yi was sensible enough to help him trick the God Knowledge Grass from Bing Wuqing, he had no intention of continuing to make things difficult for him. Chiu Ming-chung left, but before he left, he deliberately glanced at the bed. Although he still couldn't see anything, his gaze was meaningful. That guy's eyes are strange. Don't tell me he's taken a fancy to you? Lin Yi turned to Duan Yu on the bed and said, "Huh." Duan Yu was stunned. Then she shook her head with a strange expression and said, "That can't be. I don't have any private contact with him. And a while ago, the higher-ups were discussing what? Lin Yi saw her hesitant expression and couldn't help but feel a little strange. This girl had always been forthright and rarely hesitated. Chapter 5389. Yes, as many as you want here. Only then did Lin Yi remember that there was still a pile of women's clothes in his jade pendant space. He had already given a set to Duan Muyu during the primeval trial last time. He was distracted just now and did not remember this. After taking the clothes from Lin Yi, Duan Muyu did not get out of the quilt. Instead, she looked at Lin Yi with a strange expression and said, "You didn't do it on purpose, did you?" Of course not. You're thinking too much." Lin Yi suddenly sweated. Although Duan Muyu's appearance was indeed quite pleasing to the eye, he really did not think of this. "Is that so?" Duan Muyu was skeptical, but there was no unhappy expression on her face. After putting on the clothes quickly, she immediately returned to her usual elegant and neat manner. It seemed that she did not take the previous embarrassment to heart at all. "Of course. How can an honest person like me do such a wretched thing? After all, we've gone through life and death together. It's not like you don't know this." Lin Yi's words were justified, but looking at Duan Muyu, who looked like a new urban white-collar worker, he could not help but think of her naked appearance, and he felt a little guilty. "Forget it. Seeing that you've given me so many supreme-grade gold cores, I'll just look at them. It's nothing anyway." Duan Muyu once again showed her forthright side. Lin Yi was speechless. After coming out of the confinement room, Chiu Ming-chung did not lead the way for Bing Wuqing, who was waiting in the reception room. Instead, he went straight to the Godleaf Hall. This was the most core and authoritative place in the entire Yiling sect. It was where the sect leader and a group of high-level elders gathered and all orders were issued from. At this time, the sect leader Yi Qingqing and other high-level elders were all present. When they saw Chiu Ming-chung register and enter, they all showed some anticipation. "Did you get the divine consciousness grass?" "Master, not yet." Chiu Ming-chung respectfully performed a disciple's salute. Although Duan Muyu had surpassed him, his position in the sect was not low. After all, he was the personal disciple of the sect master, Yi Qingqing. "Then why don't you hurry over and keep an eye on him?" Yi Qingqing frowned. The spiritual awareness grass was an absolutely fatal temptation for any gold core stage master. Even if he was already the head of a sect, even if he was only one step away from the Yuanying stage, he still coveted it. If there was no chance at all, then it was fine. Now that it was within his reach, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. The other high-level elders were also urging him on. If they could get their hands on the God-knowledge grass from Duan Muyu and Bing Wuqing this time, Yi Qingqiang would definitely get the lion's share, but they would definitely get a share as well. If they couldn't get the meat, they should at least get some soup. Yes. However, this disciple just discovered something and felt that it was necessary to report it to Master and the elders. Chiu Ming-chung said, "What could be more important than the divine sense grass?" Yi Qingqing and the other elders frowned. "When I went to talk to Lin Yi just now, I found eldest senior's sister hiding under the blanket, and there were pieces of her clothes all over the floor. It seems like she went too far." Chiu Ming-chung said with ulterior motives. "Outrageous." The group of high-level elders immediately started cursing when they heard this. As the eldest senior sister of the sect, how can she be so shameless and openly have an affair with a man from another sect in a restricted area? Where is the image of our Yiling sect? What a scandal! Yi Qingqing was even more enraged. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that he was trying to make a fuss. This was not surprising, because although Duan Muyu was recognized as the eldest senior sister of the sect, she was not his disciple. There was nothing he could do about it. Who asked Chiu Ming-chung to not live up to expectations? Letting Duan Muyu take the position of the eldest senior sister of the sect was somewhat embarrassing for the sect master, Yi Qingqing. He could not show it on the surface, but he still bore a grudge in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have listened to Chiu Ming-chung's slanderous words and strongly advocated for Duan Muyu to hand over the spiritual awareness grass. If this matter really spread out, it would be very embarrassing, but he did not care. It was a good opportunity to suppress Duan Muyu. Now, Duan Muyu actually had an affair with an outsider. That was even more terrible, and it would ruin the sect's reputation. Directly removing her status as the eldest senior sister was already a light punishment. This was exactly what Chiu Ming-chung wanted. He deliberately said this at this juncture in order to make Yi Qingqing and the other high-level elders remove Duan Muyu from the position of the eldest senior sister. This way, he would naturally be able to become the eldest senior brother of the sect. His strength at the peak late foundation establishment was a little weaker, but he was still the personal disciple of the sect master, Yi Qingqing. Moreover, there were not many disciples in the Yiling sect to begin with. Apart from Duan Muyu, no one could be above him, so it was only natural for him to be promoted. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. Chiu Ming-chung thought that his master would definitely go along with his wishes. But in the end, he heard Yi Qingqing say, "This matter concerns the image of our Yiling sect, so we have to investigate it. However, we should suppress it for now and discuss it after they hand over the spiritual awareness grass." Chiu Ming-chung was stunned and could not help but feel disappointed. Duan Muyu would be severely punished for doing such a thing sooner or later. But in his opinion, the result of discussing it now and later was likely to be very different. At this time, Duan Muyu was almost standing on the opposite side of all the high-level elders of the sect. Once she was severely punished, her position as the eldest senior sister would definitely be lost, and there might even be a heavier punishment that would make her unable to rise again. However, if they discussed it later, it would be hard to say if she really handed over the spiritual awareness grass. At that time, for the sake of the spiritual awareness grass, the high-level elders of the sect, including his master Yi Qingqing, would definitely be too embarrassed to kill her. If they were to go easy on her, maybe Duan Muyu would be able to get away with it. Unfortunately, Chiu Ming-chung had no right to speak on this occasion. Yi Qingqing had the final say. After all, for Yi Qingqing and the high-level elders of the other sects, punishing Duan Muyu was only a small matter. The spiritual awareness grass was the most important thing. If Duan Muyu was forced to completely give up and resist stubbornly because of this matter, it would not be worth it. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and go. Yi Qingqing glared at him. Yes. Chiu Ming-chung did not dare to delay and obediently retreated. Soon, Bing Wuqing arrived at the confinement room under Chiu Ming-chung's guidance. The iron door opened, and Bing Wuqing could not help but frown slightly as she felt the faint fluctuations of the array in front of her. Chapter 5390. He was very sure that no formation could trap Lin Yi, at least not in the primordial underworld. Since it was Lin Yi who asked her to enter, Bing Wuqing naturally did not hesitate and immediately stepped in. "All right, since he's here, the three of you can have a good talk. I hope there'll be good news when I come back later. Of course, it'll be good news for you too. Otherwise, you'll be imprisoned in this dark place for the rest of your lives. I'm sure it'll be very frustrating, right?" Chiu Ming-chung laughed, closed the iron door, and left. "Boss, what's going on?" Bing Wuqing nodded slightly at Duan Muyu, who was beside her as a form of greeting, and asked directly. Lin Yi's letter to him did not mention the specific situation. He only asked him to come over, and he was still confused until now. Duan Muyu couldn't help but look at Lin Yi in surprise when she heard this tone. Previously, during the primordial trials, she did see that there should be some tacit understanding and connection between the two, but she didn't expect it to be this kind of relationship. From this tone, Bing Wuqing was clearly like Wu Qintian and the others, becoming a loyal subordinate of Lin Yi. Others might not be much, but Bing Wuqing was a famous super genius in the entire primordial underworld. She had always been arrogant and rarely looked others in the eye. Now, she was actually willing to submit to Lin Yi. This was really a little embarrassing. However, when she remembered that the other party was Lin Yi, after the shock, Duan Muyu felt that this matter was reasonable. Back in the primordial trials, even a legendary existence like Jiu Ying was frightened by Lin Yi. As long as he wanted to, subduing Bing Wuqing was naturally a piece of cake. Lin Yi told the whole story in a few words. After listening, Bing Wuqing had a strange expression on her face. She carefully looked at Lin Yi and Duan Muyu and finally came to a conclusion. I didn't know that the higher-ups of the Yiling sect are really good at courting death. He could tell that Duan Muyu and Lin Yi's relationship was not ordinary. Moreover, these people had actually blackmailed Lin Yi himself. If this wasn't courting death, what was? In comparison, the upper echelon members of the Snow Sword School were rather tactful. Duan Muyu was speechless. Even from her point of view, she felt that the higher-ups of her sect were courting death. She wasn't worried about Lin Yi and her situation at all. Instead, she was more worried about Yiling's sect. What if they really angered Lin Yi this time and he casually destroyed the entire sect? Putting everything else aside, she still had deep feelings for the Yiling sect. Then what does boss mean? Bing Wuqing looked at Lin Yi. There was no need for him to use his brain in such a situation. He would just do whatever Lin Yi said. Even if Lin Yi ordered him to destroy the entire Yiling sect, he would absolutely not object. Of course, for the sake of Duan Muyu, Lin Yi would definitely not do so. There's no hurry. By the way, you saw Chiu Mingchong just now. Did he look familiar? Lin Yi suddenly asked. Chiu Mingchong. Bing Wuqing thought for a moment and said, he just went to the secular world to train. There doesn't seem to be anything special about him. Wait, he does look a little familiar. Seems like I'm not mistaken. He's one of them. Lin Yi nodded. What are you guys talking about? Duan Muyu was confused. She had no idea what the two of them are talking about. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing looked at each other. They didn't hide anything anymore and revealed everything. There's an extremely mysterious and powerful organization in the secular world called the Center. After this training in the secular world, they've already instigated many spies in various primordial sects. If I'm not wrong, they've already brought people to infiltrate the primordial underworld. After lying low for a period of time, they'll probably start to encroach on the primordial alliance. Encroach on the primordial alliance? Is that even possible? Duan Muyu was dumbfounded. She had never seen the center's strength and resources. Moreover, she was born and raised in the primordial underworld. When she suddenly heard this, she naturally felt that it was a fantasy story. Of course it's possible. They can easily create a bunch of nascent soul old monsters. Given time, how difficult would it be to encroach on the primordial alliance? Lin Yi said, create a bunch of nascent soul old monsters. Duan Muyu was completely dumbfounded. Nascent soul old monsters were the highest combat power in the primordial underworld. If they could really mass produce them, not to mention encroaching on the primordial alliance, it wouldn't be difficult for them to directly control the entire primordial underworld. Although she was horrified, Duan Muyu quickly recovered. At least on the surface, she had regained her composure. She changed the topic and asked, then you said Chiu Mingchong is... He's one of the chess pieces that the center has secretly instigated. Lin Yi confirmed. From the first time he met Chiu Mingchong, he had already been suspicious. However, he didn't have a complete grasp of the center's list of instigated defections. He could only rely on his initial observations. Unless he paid special attention, he would only leave a slight impression. It was only now that he had Bing Wuqing's testimony that he was completely certain. Of course, Bing Wuqing couldn't fully grasp the list of instigated defections. However, every time she contacted the bespectacled doctor, she would more or less meet with other people. Even if she didn't say it explicitly, she could still make some guesses. There's such a thing. Duan Muyu was instantly shocked and angry. Although it was a question, there was no doubt about the meaning behind it. Otherwise, there was no way to explain Chiu Mingchong's recent abnormal behavior. Although this guy always had the intention of replacing her, He didn't have the guts to do so in the past. As the three of them spoke, the iron door outside opened. Chiu Ming-chung stood at the door and asked, "How did the discussion go?" "Oh, you mean the consciousness grass?" "Sorry, it's already been used up by Bing Wuching." Lin Yi answered casually. This was the truth. The consciousness grass had indeed been used up by Bing Wuching. "Yes, it's quite delicious." Bing Wuching took the opportunity to reply. She turned to look at Duan Muyu and said, "You ate it too. How did it taste?" It was indeed quite delicious. Duan Muyu cooperated. Since they already knew that the other party was a spy from the center, this matter was no longer something that she or anyone else sent by Yiling could deal with. They could only let Lin Yi handle it. They would do whatever Lin Yi said. "What? You ate it?" Chiu Ming-chung exploded in anger. This time, he had used the consciousness grass to stir up trouble, not just to replace Duan Muyu's position. More importantly, he had received orders from the center. If he couldn't fish in troubled waters and get the consciousness grass, the consequences would be unimaginable. Chapter 5391. Nonsense. It's so hard to get the divine knowledge grass. If it were you, wouldn't you eat it? Lin Yi scoffed. But isn't Duan Muyu at foundation, establishment, great perfection? Chiu Ming-chung still did not believe it. "Sorry, I'm already at the golden core stage." Duan Muyu smiled faintly. "You." Chiu Ming-chung choked, then flew into a rage out of humiliation. He snorted, "I really hope this is just a joke. Otherwise, it won't be good news for the three of you. I can only ask my master to personally punish the three of you." "Punish us?" Duan Muyu was taken aback. He said with a strange expression, "It's fine if they punish me. After all, I'm a disciple of the Yiling sect. But these two are outsiders. Even if your master is the sect leader, what right does he have to punish people from other sects? Chiu Ming-chung, is there something wrong with your brain?" If this was before, even if he knew that Chiu Ming-chung was up to no good, Duan Muyu would not have said this. But now that he knew that Chiu Ming-chung was a spy, there was nothing to worry about. "Humph! Since you're in the territory of the Yiling sect, you naturally have to follow the rules of the Yiling sect. Besides, you're just two weaklings. Can't my master, the sect leader, take care of you?" Chiu Ming-chung pretended to be pretentious. Of course, he knew that both Lin Yi and Bing Wuching's powers were not to be underestimated. However, his knowledge was only based on what he had seen in the trial competition. He thought that Lin Yi was invincible below the golden elixir realm, while Bing Wuching was only at the early stage of the golden elixir realm. Of course, he had to look up to such powers. However, his master, Yi Qingqing, was a golden elixir perfected being. After hearing his words, Duan Muyu and Bing Wuching looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. Only Lin Yi had a look of agreement on his face. "What you said makes so much sense that I actually have nothing to say." Duan Muyu and Bing Wuching rolled their eyes at the same time. They were speechless that Lin Yi would have the mood to joke with this kind of person. Good that you know. Just you wait." Chiu Ming-chung thought that Lin Yi wanted to admit defeat and leave with an arrogant attitude. It was too late for regrets now. In the Divine Leaf Temple, Yi Qingqing and the other elders were waiting for Chiu Ming-chung's good news. However, after Chiu Ming-chung's report, all of their expressions became ugly. "This is too much." Yi Qingqing suddenly slammed the table, and the huge conference table turned into powder. He was only one step away from breaking through to the nascent soul realm. Now his only thought was to obtain the divine sense grass to further refine his divine sense. That way, not only could he become the strongest gold core expert in the ancient martial world, he could also lay a good foundation for breaking through to the nascent soul realm. In the process of breaking through to the nascent soul realm, even if it was just a little bit more confident, he absolutely couldn't let it go. The three of them are clearly looking down on Master and our Yiling sect, especially Duan Muyu, who openly slept with an outsider and ruined the sect's reputation. In my opinion, he must be severely punished. Otherwise, if word of this gets out, we'll become the laughingstock of the pugilistic world. Chiao Ming-chong took the opportunity to sow discord. No one had any objections to this. However, one person suddenly stood up. It was a middle-aged man with snow-white hair. He was thin and had a weak aura. At first glance, he looked like a sickly person who couldn't withstand the wind and rain. However, no one present dared to look down on him. Even the sect master, Yi Qingqing, was wary of him. This person was called Yi Tongxian, and he was Yi Qingqing's senior and junior brother. At the same time, like Yi Qingqing, he was the only 2 golden core perfected experts in the Yiling sect. You said that you were slept with an outsider? Yi Tongshuan's cold gaze pierced Chiao Ming-chong's heart. He subconsciously took a few steps back. One should know that he had another identity, which was Duanmu Yu's master. If not for his strong backing, Duanmu Yu wouldn't have been able to sit in the position of eldest senior sister so easily. However, before today, Yi Tongxian had been in seclusion, so he didn't know what had happened. He also didn't know that his disciple had been grounded because of the consciousness grass, and even had her chastity tainted. I saw it with my own eyes. She and Lin Yi were alone in a room together. Their clothes were torn to shreds, and they even hid on the bed. If this isn't sleeping with him, what is it? Chiao Ming-chong said stubbornly, "Call you are here. You can confront him. If he says anything false, you can prepare to die." Yi Tongxian snorted coldly. His tone was extremely overbearing. Duanmu Yu was his only direct disciple, and he was famous for being protective of his disciples. Moreover, he had a special identity and was very powerful. Not to mention Chiao Ming-chong. Even Yi Qingqing, the sect master, couldn't do anything to him. Master. Chiao Ming-chong was so scared that his scalp went numb. He could only look at Yi Qingqing for help. If Yi Tongxian really wanted to kill him, he couldn't do anything unless Yi Qingqing intervened. It was a pity that Yi Tongxian was famous for being a pain in the neck. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yi Qingqing wouldn't want to confront this junior brother of the same sect. However, Chiao Ming-chong was his direct disciple after all, so he couldn't just ignore him. "Junior brother, don't be impulsive. If that's the case, Ming-chong, bring Duanmu Yu here with the token to confront him face to face. We'll know the result then," Yi Qingqing said. If the affair was true, then even if he did not do anything, Yi Tongxian would probably clean up the sect. If this matter was fabricated out of thin air by Chiao Ming-chong, then Chiao Ming-chong only had himself to blame. No matter what, Chiao Ming-chong was just a useless disciple. In Yi Qingqing's eyes, Chiao Ming-chong did not have much weight. If he was beaten to death, then so be it. Yes. Chiao Ming-chong didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly took the token and went to fetch Duanmu Yu. Having seen that scene with his own eyes, he had full confidence in the matter of Duanmu Yu and Lin Yi. At this time, he wasn't particularly flustered. Before he left, he turned his head and asked, "Master, what about Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing?" "Humph, the Blackwater Matrix is a first-class trapping matrix. Even an ordinary Yuanying stage old monster can't break out of the matrix. Let them live and die on their own." Yi Qingqing snorted coldly. This time, he was determined to get the grasp of consciousness. He didn't expect that it would turn out like this. He couldn't help but be angry. However, as the leader of a sect, he couldn't easily kill a disciple from another sect. That would give others a bad impression. So he might as well imprison him until the end. Very soon, Chiao Ming-chong brought Duanmu Yu over. When Duanmu Yu saw Yi Tongxian, he was instantly delighted. He hurriedly greeted, "Master, you've come out of seclusion." "You are you?" Yi Tongxian originally wanted to ask about the matter of sleeping with him, but when he saw the faint aura around Duanmu Yu, his eyelids twitched. He said in surprise, "You've actually succeeded in breaking through to the golden elixir realm?" and you're still at the peak of the early golden elixir realm? Chapter 5392. As soon as she said this, everyone was in an uproar. At this moment, Duan Muyu did not deliberately release her aura. No one, including Yi Qingqing, noticed the change in her body. Only Yi Tongxian, who knew her best, saw through it with one glance. Yi Qingqing and the others were stunned. Not only did she succeed in breaking through to the golden elixir realm, but she also became a master at the peak of the early golden elixir realm. What was going on? Master, please understand. I made a good friend during this experience in the secular world. Without him, I would not be where I am today, Duan Muyu said truthfully. Although it was only a matter of time before she broke through to the golden elixir realm with her own qualifications. If it were not for Lin Yi, the time would have been dragged on for 3 to 5 years. Moreover, it would have been impossible for her to break through to the peak of the early golden elixir realm at once. Oh, there's actually such an extraordinary person? Yi Tongxian could not help but be surprised. He knew that Duan Muyu never lied. To be precise, she disdained lying. There was actually someone who could help her break through to the golden elixir realm in such a short period of time. What kind of person was this? At this time, Qiu Mingchong sneered and said, "Hey, you can't be talking about Lin Yi, can you? No wonder you were willing to become his mistress. This is really understandable. You can break through to the golden elixir realm by sleeping with someone and rise 2 levels in a row. No matter who it is, they would be tempted, right?" "What did you say?" Duan Muyu frowned. "Pretending? Still pretending at this time? Is there a point? I saw you hiding in bed with my own eyes, and your clothes were torn to pieces on the ground. Dry would met fire. The 2 of you must have gone crazy," Qiu Mingchong said sarcastically. Is this true?" Yi Tongxian asked in a low voice, although he believed in his disciple's character. As Qiu Mingchong said, if Duan Muyu had paid a high enough price, why would the other party help her break through to the golden elixir realm for no reason? The resources needed were not just words. Even as a master of the great perfection of the golden elixir realm, he might not be able to afford it. Before Duan Muyu could say anything, Yi Qingqing, who was on the other side, had already come to a conclusion. "Looks like it's true. If this sect leader remembers correctly, you weren't wearing these clothes before you entered, right?" The other elders of the upper echelon all nodded. Duan Muyu was now dressed in the clothes of the mortal world. In the small pugilistic world of the supreme ancient immortal realms, he could be said to be an oddity. It was impossible for them not to notice him. Duan Muyu blushed, which was rare for her. No matter how tough she was, it was impossible for her to say that she had changed her clothes in public. She could only refute. "Sect leader Sherbois, you misunderstood me. It's true that I have changed my clothes, but it doesn't mean that I have done anything shameful. You've already rolled in the sheets, but you haven't done anything shameful? Ha, this is really rare." Qiu Mingchong was adamant. This kind of thing was equivalent to mud falling into the crotch of one's pants. Even if it wasn't shit, it was still shit. As long as he insisted on not letting go, Duan Muyu would not be able to prove himself. Even jumping into the Yellow River would not be able to wash himself clean. Duan Muyu was furious, but she really did not know how to prove her innocence at the moment. In the face of the suspicious gazes of Yi Qingqing and the others, she could not help but feel helpless. She could not possibly take the initiative to let others verify that she was still a virgin, could she? At this moment, a faint voice suddenly came from the entrance of the Godleaf Palace. "Your Yiling sect is really interesting. I just gave you a set of clothes, but you actually keep such a close watch on what female disciples wear. Just how free are you, the higher-ups, really?" "Who is it?" Yi Qingqing and the others were shocked at the same time. They had so many golden core stage experts, but they did not notice that there were 2 people standing at the entrance. If the other party did not take the initiative to speak, but instead launched a sneak attack, some of them might have already become corpses. The people who came were none other than Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. Duan Muyu was suddenly brought here at this time, so it was obvious that someone wanted to harm her. Naturally, Lin Yi would not sit idly by and do nothing about it. Without hesitation, he broke out of the array with Bing Wuching. Although the black water array was powerful, it was really not enough for him. A profound ascension stage primordial spirit. After all, from the beginning, this array could only be used against ordinary nascent soul stage old monsters. This was already the limit, and there was no concept of a profound ascension stage at all. You have already locked us up. Don't you know who we are? Lin Yi calmly walked to Duan Muyu's side and gave her a look, indicating for her not to worry. Linny? Bing Wuching? Yi Qingqing frowned and turned to stare at Qiu Mingchong, asking, "What's going on?" I don't know either." Qiu Mingchong was also confused and quickly explained, "I only have a token in my hand, and it was very smooth when I brought Duan Muyu out just now." They were clearly still locked up in the black water array. Could it be that Duan Muyu discovered some loophole in the black water array and secretly told them? Even if he wanted to deny responsibility, he still had to throw the blame on Duan Muyu. Qiu Mingchong showed everyone what it meant to be a villain. Are you stupid? If she knew about the loophole in the array, she would have come out long ago. Why would she wait until now? Lin Yi looked at this guy as if he was looking at an idiot. How dare you? You trespassed into my Yi Ling sect's important place and still dare to be so unscrupulous. Do you really think that this sect master will not punish you? Yi Qingqing was furious when he saw this. He did not want to do anything to Lin Yi and Bing Wuching. After all, they were from the Yi Ling sect. It would not be good if he attacked them because he did not get the divine knowledge grass. So, he just wanted to let them fend for themselves. But it was different now. He was in an extremely bad mood at the moment because he did not get the divine knowledge grass. Now that Lin Yi was acting so fearless, wasn't he making things difficult for him in front of everyone? Even if someone were to make some sarcastic remarks about him, he would definitely make this fellow, who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, suffer today. Noisy, did I say you could speak? Lin Yi seemed to wave his hand casually. Yi Qingqing, who was already angry from embarrassment, suddenly quieted down as if he was possessed. He actually lowered his head and really did not speak. The senior elders of the Yi Ling sect did not understand what was going on. With their eyesight, they could not see what was going on. They could only see that Lin Yi had made Yi Qingqing obediently shut up with just a few words. They could not help but feel puzzled. Why was the sect master's temper so good? Who was this guy? Among the crowd, only Yi Tongxian seemed to have noticed something. He looked at Lin Yi with shock and anger. He was about to speak, but he saw Duan Muyu shake his head at him. Only then did he forcibly swallow the words on the tip of his tongue and wait and see. Chapter 5393. All right, I'll hold a meeting to discuss the traitor of your Yi Ling sect. Lin Yi naturally took over the reins. The natural aura of a superior that emanated from his body shocked everyone present. This wasn't an aura of actual threat, but it made everyone feel fear and trepidation from the bottom of their hearts, and they didn't dare to look at him directly. The traitor! Yi Tongxian was stunned. At this time, he was the only one who had the confidence to speak. He frowned and asked, "Who are you calling a traitor?" "The traitor I'm talking about, of course, is him." Lin Yi pointed at Qiu Mingchong with his lips and said casually, "This guy has been secretly bribed by Xue Jianfeng. He's now Xue Jianfeng's lackey." He didn't want to reveal the Central's affairs for now. Firstly, he was afraid of alerting the enemy. Secondly, he was afraid that it would cause too much of a shock to the Immemorial Alliance and cause chaos in the entire Immemorial Underworld. That would give the Central an opportunity to take advantage of, so he could only reveal it bit by bit. As soon as he said this, everyone's eyes focused on Qiu Mingchong. Everyone looked suspicious. After all, they weren't fools. Qiu Mingchong had indeed behaved strangely after returning from the secular world. He wouldn't have stirred up trouble in the past, Could there really be a problem with this guy? Bullsh *T. Chiu Ming-chong was still at a loss. Hearing this, he quickly retorted, I have nothing to do with Xue Jianfeng. How can I be his lackey? It was you who had an affair with Duanmuyu. You're slandering me and trying to make a false accusation. Master, elders, don't believe this ignorant ****. He's trying to drive a wedge between us. Everyone once again turned their doubtful eyes to Lin Yi. Compared to Chiu Ming-chong, Lin Yi, this outsider with an unknown background, seemed to be a bigger problem. Do you have evidence? Yi Tongxian frowned and asked. In the past, Lin Yi might have patiently helped them find evidence. However, he wasn't in the mood today. He immediately said to Bing Wuqing, I'll leave it to you. If he doesn't admit it, kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was dumbfounded. This was Yi Ling's sect. Wasn't this guy being too overbearing? This was Yi Ling's sect's territory, and he was facing Chiu Ming-chong, the second-ranked top-notch disciple of Yi Ling's sect. Yet, this fellow couldn't even be bothered to provide the most basic evidence and just wanted to kill him. Who did he think he was? Aren't you going too far? Yi Tongxian could not stand it any longer. Although he was Duanmuyu's master and naturally stood on Duanmuyu's side, he was still one of the important higher-ups of the Yi Ling sect. He could not stand to see Lin Yi slapping him in the face so unscrupulously. That's right. Who do you think you are? How dare you come here and point your fingers? Another high-level elder stood up angrily. This person was Chiu Hong, an expert at the pinnacle of the late Golden Elixir realm. In terms of strength and status, he was second only to Yi Qingqing and Yi Tongxian. He had a fiery temper, and most importantly, he was a distant relative of Chiu Ming-chong. He could be considered Chiu Ming-chong's second backer. At this moment, Yi Qingqing was not saying anything for some reason, and Chiu Ming-chong was being threatened in public. As the second backer, he could only stand up to support the situation. Of course, from Chiu Hong's point of view, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were simply acting recklessly, and he could use this opportunity to boost his prestige. Lin Yi ignored him, and neither did Bing Wuqing. After all, she never had the habit of talking nonsense. Seeing the situation, she directly pressed the merciless ice force over. Chiu Hong didn't even have the time to react. He didn't even have the chance to resist and was pressed to the ground on the spot. Nascent soul realm old monster. Chiu Hong was already speechless. Yi Tongxian and the others were all shocked. After all, this was the headquarters of the Yi Ling sect. Before this, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were just courting death in their eyes. Even if Bing Wuqing was widely recognized as a super genius, so what? She was only at the early Golden Elixir realm. At most, she could advance one level to the pinnacle of the early Golden Elixir realm. So what? Who would have thought that she had not only advanced one level, but had also advanced directly to the level of a nascent soul realm old monster? How were they supposed to deal with this? In front of a nascent soul realm old monster, these people were like paper. No wonder Lin Yi was so arrogant. He really had the confidence. The group of Yi Ling sect's higher-ups were all scared silly, Yi Tongxian included, and no one said anything. As for Chiu Hong, who was kneeling on the ground, he did not even dare to raise his head, for fear of making eye contact with the other party. If he accidentally angered the other party, he could die. Bing Wuqing's gaze immediately fell on Chiu Ming-chong. According to Lin Yi's instructions, if this guy refused to admit it, he could become a corpse. Anyway, they had completely broken off their relationship with the sect, so it did not matter if they killed an unimportant pawn of the sect. Don't come any closer. Chiu Ming-chong was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He would never have thought that there would be a day when he would be cornered to this extent in the Yi Ling sect's headquarters. Based on the other party's attitude, if he dared to deny it, he might really become a corpse. Live or die, you choose, Bing Wuqing said expressionlessly. Chiu Ming-chong cursed madly in his heart. Right now, He could only live by admitting that he was a spy. But if he did that, would these people from Yiling's sect let him go? In the end, he would still die. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing was obviously not in the mood to think so much for him. Seeing that he was hesitating, she directly enveloped him with her heartless ice force. With Chiu Ming-chung's meager strength, he did not even need to do anything. In the blink of an eye, he would be frozen into a popsicle. "Master, save me. Master's junior uncle, save me." Chiu Ming-chung felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He screamed in panic, but the group of Yi Ling sect's higher-ups pretended not to hear him. What a joke! How could they dare to be presumptuous in front of a nascent, soul old monster like Bing Wuqing? Then die. Bing Wuqing made the final death sentence. "No, if you dare to kill me, you'll definitely die a worse death than me in the future. Xue Jianfeng will avenge me." Chiu Ming-chung shouted at the top of his lungs in a final struggle. Actually, Lin Yi was not wrong at all. His current superior was no longer the bespectacled professor, but really Xue Jianfeng. In order to show how much importance he attached to Xue Jianfeng, the bespectacled professor had already assigned a portion of his spies to him. Meanwhile, he himself only paid attention to a few high-end combatants, including Xue Jianfeng. There was no need for him to be distracted by a nobody like Chiu Ming-chung. After shouting this, Chiu Ming-chung closed his eyes and waited for his death. However, after a moment of fear and trepidation, he realized that the bone-chilling aura that enveloped him had suddenly dissipated. Bing Wuqing had actually let him go. Chapter 5394. As he spoke, Lin Yi released Yi Qingqing's primordial spirit. This guy suddenly stopped moving just now because his primordial spirit was taken away by Lin Yi's soul-hooking hand. Now that his primordial spirit was back, Yi Qingqing was horrified. The experience just now was too horrifying. He didn't want to experience the feeling of his life and death being in the hands of the other party again. "Deal with this traitor yourselves. I won't interfere," Lin Yi said lightly. "This." Yi Qingqing hesitated. Chiu Ming-chung was his direct disciple, and he wouldn't abandon him unless he had no other choice. But now that Chiu Ming-chung had publicly admitted his identity as a spy, especially with Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing, these two unfathomable guys watching him covetously, he didn't dare to play any tricks at this time. He could only bite the bullet and say, "Guards! Take Chiu Ming-chung, this traitor, into custody. We'll discuss how to deal with him later." Lin Yi didn't have any objections. He dragged Chiu Ming-chung out purely to help Duan Muyu out of trouble. As for whether Chiu Ming-chung was dead or alive, he didn't care at all. Moreover, from the standpoint of Yiling's sect, it was hateful to discover such a traitor, but they couldn't execute him directly. There were still many things that needed to be clarified. For example, why did Xue Jianfeng bribe Chiu Ming-chung? Watching the dejected Chiu Ming-chung being taken away, Lin Yi glanced at Yi Qingqing and the others and said, "Now, does anyone still believe Chiu Ming-chung's slander of Miss Duanmu?" No, you must be joking. How can we believe the words of a traitor?" Yi Qingqing hurriedly smiled apologetically and humbly. The others might be mainly afraid of Bing Wuqing, the nascent soul realm old monster, but in his eyes Lin Yi was the most terrifying existence. This guy was definitely much more terrifying than the average nascent soul realm old monster. Is that so? Then what about the divine knowledge grass? Lin erased his eyebrows and said casually. Yi Qingqing and the others broke out in a cold sweat. When they recalled how they had tried to force Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing to ask for the divine knowledge grass previously, they felt as though 10,000 horses were galloping through their hearts. Now that they thought about it, they realized that they were practically seeking death in all sorts of ways. A heavenly treasure, like the spirit knowledge grass, naturally belongs to those who are able to obtain it. Only people of your strength are qualified to do so. We were rude before, so I sincerely apologize to you on behalf of Yiling's sect. Yi Qingqing hurriedly said respectfully. Lin Yi glanced at Duan Muyu when he heard that. He had come here purely to visit a friend, and it was entirely up to Duan Muyu to decide whether or not to make a fuss and take revenge. As for himself, it didn't matter. At his level, he wouldn't take such a small matter to heart, much less Bing Wuqing. Duan Muyu returned a pleading look. She had suffered a lot during this period of time, but after all, she had deep feelings for Yi Ling's sect. Since the culprit, Chiu Ming Chong, had been taken care of, the matter would end here. Otherwise, Yi Ling's sect would be the one to suffer losses. All right, on account of Miss Duanmu, I'll temporarily accept your insincere apology. However, I'll say the ugly words first. I don't have a good temper. If there's a next time, I won't be so nice anymore. Lin Yi took the opportunity to give everyone a heads up. In this way, if Yi Qingqing and the others wanted to settle accounts with Duanmu later, they would have to think twice. Yes. Thank you for your magnanimity, Senior. We are very grateful. Yi Qingqing didn't dare to refute. Even though he was a sect leader, and even though there was only a thin line between Golden Core perfected and nascent soul old monsters, this thin line meant that he had no right to speak in front of Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. They could kill him with just a thought, so what could he do? Yi Qingqing's only thought at this moment was to send Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing away as soon as possible. This time, for the sake of the consciousness grass, he had been blinded by Chiu Ming Chong's instigation and had set his sights on the two of them. Now it was easy to invite them in, but difficult to send them away. He was in a difficult position. The key was that he couldn't directly ask them to leave. His eyes turned, and he had an idea in this emergency. Both of you are experts, and we are too weak to serve you well. Why don't I report to our sect's Grand Supreme Elder and ask him to entertain the two of you? It was the rule of Jianghu to have a nascent soul old monster entertain a nascent soul old monster. It was reasonable for him to suggest this. At least, he could avoid being bullied unilaterally. Otherwise, it would be really stressful for him and the group of Gold Core Stage higher-ups to talk. Whatever. Lin Yi waved his hand non-committally. He had no interest in the Yi Ling sect's Grand Supreme Elder, but since he was here, there was no harm in meeting him. It could also be considered as helping Duanmu you gain some face. Okay. Please wait for a moment, seniors. I'll report to the Grand Supreme Elder right away. Yi Qingqing immediately rushed out. Logically speaking, even if they were to ask for the Grand Supreme Elder's permission, there was no need for him, the sect leader, to go personally. However, he couldn't have asked for more. After all, Chiu Ming Chong was his personal disciple. Although Chiu Ming Chong had instigated the matter of the consciousness grass, it was mainly his own idea. At this time, he didn't dare to stay in front of Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing for even a moment. The pressure was too great. After a while, an old man in green walked quickly into the God Leaf Hall accompanied by Yi Qingqing. His aura was hidden, but it gave people a feeling of unfathomable depth. All the higher-ups of the Yi Ling sect, including Yi Tongxian and Duanmu, hurriedly greeted him in unison. Without a doubt, this was the Yi Ling sect's Grand Supreme Elder, Yi Yixing. Not only was he the Grand Supreme Elder, but he was also Yi Qingqing's and Yi Tongshuan's master. In other words, he was Duanmu Yu's master. My two friends have come to visit. Please forgive me for not going out to greet you. Yi Yixing cupped his hands in greeting and smiled. All these years he had been in a state of semi-isolation. If something like this had not happened, he would normally not have come out. Bing Wuqing looked at him with some scrutiny. He was a little stronger than her at the middle nascent soul stage. However, it was obvious that this guy had internal injuries. Ordinary people couldn't see it, but it couldn't escape the observation of an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul stage.